Hello, and welcome to the Doof Book Club, our monthly live stream discussion of a book chosen by you, our listeners. My name is Matt Freeman, and this is my Voidbringer, Scott.
I'm not a Voidbringer, Matt. I'm a Spren. I'm giving you superpowers, goddammit.
Shut up, Voidbringer, and do your Voidbringing on this podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I hope you're all having a wonderful Friday evening. I'm sure we know a lot of you folks in chat right now, but if you are here for the very first time, welcome. We constitute two of the... How many people do we have now? Eight people that make up Doof Media. We make podcasts all about the stories we love, and we also arrange and organize and host this monthly book club, which Matt will now explain.
That's right. Each month, Scott and I select 5 books from a pool submitted to us by our wonderful Doof community. We put up a poll for all the supporters on Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia and let them vote on which they'd like us to talk about. The book with the most votes wins, and then we all read it.
And then we meet here on the last Friday of the month, usually. This time it's the first Friday of the month, and spend a couple of hours discussing the book. We pull slides of interesting and important moments from the story and lead a discussion all about it. Matt, I think everyone here already knows because it was in the title of the stream before they clicked it, but what book are we all discussing this month?
Words of Radiance, Book 2 of Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive.
All right, Matt, read this incredibly lengthy summary. You can maybe not read the whole summary.
Expected by his enemies to die the miserable death of a military slave, Kaladin survived to be given command of the royal bodyguards, a controversial first for low-status Dark Eyes. Now he must protect the king and Dalinar from every common peril, as well as the distinctly uncommon threat of the assassin, all while secretly struggling to master remarkable new powers that are somehow linked to his honor spren, Syl.
Spoilers? Wow.
The assassin, Szeth, is active again, murdering rulers all over the world of Roshar, using his baffling powers to thwart every bodyguard and elude all pursuers. Among his prime targets is High Prince Dalinar, widely considered the power behind the Alethi throne. His leading role in the war would seem reason enough, but the assassin's master has much deeper motives. Brilliant but troubled Shaolin strives along a parallel path. Despite being broken in ways she refuses to acknowledge, she bears a terrible burden to somehow prevent the return of the legendary Voidbringers and the civilization-ending desolation that will follow. The secret she needs can be found at the Shattered Plains, but just arriving there proves more difficult than she could have imagined. I think I'm going to stop there because the rest is not about the characters, and that's uninteresting to me.
Is it? We probably had the same conversation with Way of Kings. Is it really Shaolin and not Shaolin?
It's Shaolin, yes.
I don't like it.
I bashed it into my head this time.
Cuthbert all over again. Oh gosh, we got a lot of people in chat. Hello, everyone. I see Mike, I see John, I see Bishop, I see David and Dave, the many Daves. Miss Evil Doom, Sam, Bipolaron, Devin, Mike, Sign, Space. Hey, everyone. So many of you. I think this Brandon Sanderson guy, pretty popular.
John points out I forgot to read the prologue to the summary, so gotta go back and. Sorry.
Yeah. So we're gonna kind of go through the book here in a minute, but as always, we're gonna start with our overall feelings on the book, and I'm giving y'all an opportunity at home to let us know. What did you think of Words of Radiance? Was this the first time you read it? I'm curious. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of Sanderson fans in our audience. The Venn diagram of Sanderson fans and people that listen to our podcasts is probably just a circle. So I think most of you have probably read this book already. But if you did read this book for the first time, let us know what you thought about it. And as we're doing that, Matt, what did you think of Brandon Sanderson's Words of Radiance?
I enjoyed it quite a bit. You know, it had the benefit of starting out with these characters that we already know well, and thus it didn't have what I see as the typical issue that I have with Sanderson, where it takes me forever to start caring about the characters. I've said this many times on this podcast, but what always happens is it takes me forever to start caring, but then when I do start caring, I care a lot. Mm-hmm. He always wins me over eventually. It just takes a while. So I was already won over on these characters at the beginning, which means the whole book was basically just fun, right? Mm-hmm. There's none of that period of like, oh, I don't care, why are we doing this? And the consequence is that this is kind of like the best Sanderson reading experience that I've actually had. because I think he's at a more mature point in his career than he was with some of the other books we've read. He has a whole book of establishing the setting and these characters, and then man, does this guy know how to create a moment. And I also think that he was doing some more interesting and subtle things with the characters than I was expecting, even considering that we already knew them fairly well from the first book. So overall, very positive experience. I think that I'm probably just going to go ahead and keep reading these books regardless of whether we do them for book club or not. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, I think I've always been higher on Sanderson than you. I think generally whenever we talk about these books, like I've ended up enjoying them more than you did, at least at the beginning, at least in our pre episode conversations where we're chatting privately and you're like, oh, this book. This, however, I think the first Sanderson book I've read that I genuinely loved. Like I really liked Mistborn. I thought the next two of that series were okay. I thought Way of Kings was good. I did not like Warbreaker at all, but I loved this book. I think this was genuinely a great book. I love what he's doing. I mean, we're going to talk about Shaolin as a character a lot. But I don't think I've ever 180'd as hard as I did on a character that I did with her. Like if you listen back to our Way of Kings episodes, both of us, even in the second half of the book where I think she becomes a little bit better, both of us are pretty cold on that character. What Sanderson does with her in this book retroactively makes me appreciate everything he was doing with her in that last book. Now, we could have an argument if it takes 1,500 pages, is that good or not? And I don't care. The point is that like I really fell in love with her as a character. I really like what they're doing, and this is her book, right? That's kind of actually why this cover that's on our screen right now annoys me, because this is really Shaolin's book and she's not on it. She's not on the cover. I mean, there's a different version that I think is cycling through your background that has her in a similar setting as these other two characters, but this is her book.
Yeah, I agree. Fascinatingly, she becomes the interesting, fun character, and Kaladin kind of becomes the drag of a character.
God,
and it's not like I like dislike Kaladin now. It's just like his flaws come a lot more to the fore.
He's the whiny asshole throughout the entire book, and it works. Like I love. Actually, we're seeing in the chat so many people here are talking about how much they love this book, and it's widely regarded as one of the best of the Stormlight archive, maybe the second best. That kind of surprises me because like I just feel like Kaladin he's the type of character that when he becomes the whiny asshole, I love him more. But I feel like most people reading the book would be like, oh, what happened to this badass like self-insert character from the first book? He's just become this whiny kid who refuses to listen to everyone around him trying to tell him what the right thing to do is.
Yeah.
I love that for him though. I think it's such a way, like, if he had just kind of continued on his path of awesomeness throughout this book, I would have found it very dull, but it's not. Like, I was talking to you about this earlier in the week. There's this thing that Sanderson does in this book, and like at every moment, at every kind of branch in the story, he makes the quote-unquote right choice, which is, I mean, that's a bullshit phrase because there is no right choice. It's a story, right? Like, it's like there's no right or wrong here. But what he does is he makes the choice, and he makes the thing that happens feel like it was the right choice, feel like it was the only choice for what's going on. We're going to highlight a couple of those moments as we get through it. But man, everything works on me in this book, and everything comes together in a really, really satisfying way. I think a lot of that is just he's taken all the characters and brought them together in the same location helps a lot. Like, one of the things that Way of Kings did is that, like, Shaolin is not in the same remote side of the world that she's heading there, but she's not in the same remote side of the world as our other characters. So those two stories feel very disjointed, and they don't link up together literally or thematically. In this book, it all comes together. It all links up together perfectly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. There's a tendency, I think, in long fantasy stories for the characters to begin to feel a bit static. And I think that this book very cleverly avoids that. Like, for example, I mean, we're going to have plenty of time to talk about this, but Kaladin, he was this utterly persecuted, slave, just like had this horrible life. and so you automatically like pitied him
Mm-hmm.
and empathize with him in the last book, whereas now it's like he's been given power actually, and the way that he reacts to that is an organic kind of evolution. Like he doesn't just continue to be like the same the same person. I'm not articulating this well, but I think we'll have plenty of chances to
Sure.
talk about how, I think that this is really the book of all the Sanderson books we've read. This is the one where he shows his eye for character.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is the most recent Sanderson book we've read, right? Of all so we've read the three Mistborns, we've read the first Stormlight Archive, and we've read Warbreaker, and I think this is the most recently published book of all of those. So he's gotten better at this, and he's gotten to a point where I'm just ready to be like, okay, you've got me finally, like you've got me. I think I'm with you in that. I want to read. I'm in on the other two books in the series that are released and the future ones as well. I don't know if I want to wait for a book club again either.
Yeah.
We'll see.
My only complaint at this point is that I would be so into what was happening with Kaladin and Shallan, and then we would be like end of book 2, and then we would go off to some side character who I'd never heard of, and I'd be like, "Damn you!" But that's a sign that I was so into the characters that I didn't want to walk away from them.
Yeah, but
So,
didn't those interludes win you over eventually? Like, the cobbler who's using his power like to help people, I thought was really great. And then there's the lift character who's really fun.
yeah, and even the king with the weird intelligence power. Yeah, I mean they all did. It's just I had that flash of annoyance where
Yeah,
I
I
was
mean,
like,
I think any book where you're hopping points of view, I think you always have that momentarily like annoyed beat where you're like, oh, we've left the character I care about,
right.
and it takes you like a page to get into whatever's happening. I do think that's a sign that you're into the book, because that happened with me in A Song of Ice and Fire all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Bishop says, I think the interludes in this book were an improvement over Way of Kings. I can say, just based off the fact that I do not remember a single interlude from Way of Kings, and I'm definitely going to have distinct memories of every single one of these interludes. I think that feels right to me.
Oh, I will say that I have no idea what is going on with the plot line of the woman who's going to learn to be a merchant in the islands,
I
which are actually giant crustaceans.
Yeah,
I, I don't I don't know why we're there. Like I'm sure eventually she's going to be my favorite character, and I'm going to cry about her struggle, but I just don't understand it, and I'm not following it.
I mean, there's a lot of that in this book. There's a lot of beats where I'm just like, I don't know where to put this in my brain yet. So like the whole kind of side plot with the queen that and the riots, and I forget the name of the home city, but that like this, it's all very clearly set up for later stuff. There's a lot of like Thor going to the pool to get visions of Infinity Stone moments in this book, because it is kind of trying to set up some stuff that's coming. But I think
oh, that reference. Okay.
I think the stuff that is focused on the characters is so good that those moments just didn't bother me at all. I will say generally, like, I have no, like, I don't know how much we're supposed to know about like the Cosmere stuff at this point in the series. And what's more, I just don't give a shit. I just don't care. Like, I'm so into the characters. I'm not, I don't care about the larger global scope stuff. Like Wit as a character, I'm just like, okay, I don't care.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, Wit is basically Q, right? He's from like a higher plane or something. Who knows?
Yeah.
He's amusing. It's good. It's fine.
And if I had one worry about the series, it's that, like, by definition, it's going to have to start delving into that larger, Cosmere scope stuff eventually, right? Like, it's just going to have to do that. And I mean, I think at this, Sanderson has earned my trust enough to him. Like, well, he can do it and make it engaging, and as long as he keeps it centered on these characters that I've fallen in love with. But I have not been. There's no part of me that's like, I'm really interested in this stuff.
Right.
I'm not.
Yeah, I'm not either, but it doesn't hurt my enjoyment. I'm just like, okay.
Yeah.
So that was a good prologue to our conversation. Very Sanderson of us.
Yeah, it was. So yeah, Gray agrees. Don't care about what the Cosmere, does not like Wit. Bishop says it's like the MCU for you. Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, that's the weird. I feel like maybe if I had read this book like 8 years ago, if I was it out. If I'd read this book when it came out, I would have been more into this sprawling, interconnected nature of stuff. And I feel like I've just aged out of this stuff a lot, and I just don't care as much. I just tell me a good story with some good characters, and I'm into it. Like, I mean, it's so funny because we're doing a whole Dark Tower series, and that's like this big, sprawling, interconnected world. But it's always like, how's this interconnected? And Stephen King's always like, I mean, there's like, it's a guy, and he might be the same guy, but
Yeah.
no.
Similar name, whatever. Yeah.
Mhm.
A lot of people are saying that Oathbringer is like even better than this one, so that makes me excited to keep reading.
It's also exciting for me now that like I know the names of the next two books, and I like, I was like that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood meme where I like saw the name of the books and I was like, I know what that means, because Oathbringer, right? And then I think the fourth book is named Rhythm of War, and I was like, ooh, I know what that means. That's the Parshendi people. That's gonna be really interesting.
Sounds good. All right.
Hey, let's get into it.
Time to go.
Yeah.
Time to do it. All right. So I will begin, I suppose,
Do it.
with the introduction. 6 years ago, Yasna Kolin pretended to enjoy the party, giving no indication that she intended to have one of the guests killed. She wandered through the crowded feast hall, listening as wine-greased tongues and dimmed minds. Her uncle Dalinar was in the full swing of it, rising from the high table to shout for the Parshendi to bring out their drummers. Yasna's brother, Elhokar, hurried to shush their uncle, though the Alethi politely ignored Dalinar's outburst. All save Elhokar's wife, Aesidin, who snickered primly behind a handkerchief. Yasna turned away from the high table and continued through the room. She had an appointment with an assassin, and she was all too glad to be leaving the stuffy room, which stank of too many perfumes mingling. A quartet of women played flutes on a raised platform across the lively hearth, and the music had long since grown tedious. Unlike Dalinar, Yasna drew stares. Like flies to rotten meat, those eyes were, constantly following her, whispers like buzzing wings. If there was one thing the Alethi court enjoyed more than wine, it was gossip. Everyone expected Dalinar to lose himself to wine during a feast, but the king's daughter admitting to heresy? That was unprecedented. Yasna had spoken of her feelings for precisely that reason. She passed the Parshendi delegation, which clustered near the high table, talking in their rhythmic language. Though this celebration honored them and the treaty they'd signed with Yasna's father, they didn't look festive or even happy. They looked nervous. Of course, they weren't human, and the way they reacted was sometimes odd. Yasna wanted to speak with them, but her appointment would not wait. She'd intentionally scheduled the meeting for the middle of the feast, as so many would be distracted and drunken. Yasna headed toward the doors, but then stopped in place. Her shadow was pointing in the wrong direction. The stuffy, shuffling, chattering room seemed to grow distant. High Prince Sadeas walked right through the shadow, which quite distinctly pointed toward the sphere lamp on the wall nearby. Engaged in conversation with his companion, Sadeas didn't notice. Yasna stared at the shadow, skin growing clammy, stomach clenched, the way she felt when she was about to vomit. Not again. She searched for another light source, a reason. Could she find a reason? No.
All right, Matt, tell me what you thought about this Sanderson prologue.
Well, it was about 1 billion times better than the other prologue for the previous book.
Yeah, I think so. Two makes a beginning of a pattern, right? And I think I'm going to be very interested to see if this is something we're going to continue to do throughout the rest of the books. Is that the prologue in the first book was this event from the perspective of Seth, right?
Right, yeah.
And then this is the perspective of Yasna, and I wonder in the next book, are we going to see it from the perspective of another character? In the next book, another one. I mean, this is kind of the moment. This is almost the instigating moment of the whole plot. What happens here this night? So I like that we're returning to the same event, and it allows you. It does a lot of things for me. I mean, first it kind of reminds me and reintroduces me to the world in a very effective way, because it had been I think 15 months since we read the first book, and I didn't remember a lot of it, and I thought Sanderson did a very good job of like reintroducing us to concepts and bits of the world that I had totally forgotten about, and so replaying a portion of the scene that we had already seen helps with that. And there's a lot going on here, right? The question did I miss it? Who is she gonna have assassinated?
Oh, I forgot.
I think if I understood correctly, it's Elokar's wife, right?
um, I don't remember because this was a long time ago. This is the beginning of the month.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was kind of disturbing to learn that she would be willing to go to these lengths, but it was like her heart is in the right place, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I mean, it's very kind of unclear. Eva's saying yes to what I said, so okay, I'm hoping that's right. Okay, but I think it's very unclear as to why she would want to be doing that, right? Like, I don't think she goes into it, I believe.
Yeah, no, she calls it off for some specific reason, and
Yeah,
then like you kind of feel like maybe she was never going to go through with it at all because it's
sure.
kind of it's not that it's not in her character because she did murder a bunch of dudes with her magic powers
Sure.
in the last book, but I don't think like cold-blooded assassination is kind of her thing necessarily. I
Mm,
do think Yasna's a fun character. She's one that I think it works. It may be better for her to be a non, main point of view character, and also as we're gonna get to, her serving the Obi-Wan Kenobi role of dying after imparting some basic skills to her protege is sort of the necessary step in this book.
yes,
But
dying,
yeah,
dying. I totally called that, by the way. No corpse, not dead.
see, I thought she was dead. I kind of hoped she was dead just because I was like, consequences, things changing,
Yeah.
but no.
I mean, I don't know. We'll see. She's effectively dead enough to where the consequences are felt, right?
That's
Like, it's
true.
not like she gets stabbed and then it's actually I'm fine and now you're still with me, Shaolin. So she's dead
Yeah,
enough for what it matters, which is how it affects Shaolin and her journey through the book.
yeah,
But
that's true.
we knew she had Stormlight powers, and like those people are really hard to kill, and we don't see a body, and obviously she just like went over to Shadesmar or something. We don't really understand all
Yeah,
that, but
it seems like she like teleported to Shadesmar and then stayed there for a ridiculously long time.
and
Yeah,
learned a lot of shit about a lot of shit.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really interesting like things going on. There's I love being reminded of stuff that's really interesting and like motivates you to want to read more, because like we have Dalinar, and this kind of opening reminds us that Dalinar was like the drunken idiot at the feast, right? And that's obviously a big thing for him because he blames himself for his brother's death, and but it's also like that's an unrecognizable version of Dalinar. Like the Dalinar that we've seen throughout the course of these books just doesn't act like that at all. And then it reminds you that there's this weird thing with Dalinar and his wife that we still don't understand, where like she's just not in his brain somehow. And
Yeah.
we still don't understand what's going on with that. It's just like it's really good to remind you of all this stuff that actually doesn't get answered in this book either.
Right. I mean, I think all we know is like there's a magic thing that grants wishes, and he seems to have wished to have every recollection of his wife erased from his brain.
Yeah, but that's I mean, there's a lot going on
Yeah.
around there.
So that which actually I think is very interestingly connecting to what I began to see as the themes of this series, or at the very least the theme of this book, which is like people struggling with memories that they don't know
Yeah.
how to deal with.
Memories and truth and lies, and the
Hmm.
lies we tell ourselves and what those lies mean. I mean, that's like this is like we said, this is Shallon's book, and that is definitely core to what's going on with her, is the lies she creates, both literally in her magic power and figuratively in how she's kind of rewritten her past in her mind.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very good. I like how he does it. It was surprising. I thought I had Shallan in particular kind of pinned as a character, and then you realize. So I know we're getting ahead of ourselves, and I'm sorry about that, but I'm not. Um, what he does with Shallan is so great because he gets you, the reader, to form this mistaken low estimation of Shallan's character,
Mm-hmm.
and then so you see her the way everyone else sees her, which is like, okay, she's tries too hard to be funny and she's not very funny, and she's, I don't know, she's not so cool, she's not but then like then you and the other characters eventually realize that she's actually a total badass, and
Yeah.
it's great stuff.
I didn't pull a slide for it, so we can move on to the kind of Shaolin slide, which is next. But
Yeah.
I think the biggest, the most impactful Shaolin moment in the book for me is when you learn that her witticisms became a coping mechanism to like not only survive her childhood, but also like do what she could for her brothers to not make their existences miserable and terrible and awful. And like that to me, like Sanderson wit, like I've never been a big fan of Sanderson wit, both the character and just like the way he writes wittiness, and I'm still not like a huge fan of it. Like I still don't love it, but like its motivation around that character became beautiful to me, to the point where like I don't care that it doesn't always work on me.
Yeah. Right. It became this sign of her strength as a character,
Yeah.
in the face of something truly terrible, rather than just like a kind of annoying tick.
For sure. So before we move on to the next slide, I just want to comment. Miss Evil Doom says she's basically dead for this book, talking to Yasna. She Gandalf died, says John, which is true. She did Gandalf die.
Yeah. No, this is Yasna the White.
Mike says, always have an assassin at the ready to kill any of your friends and family. Call them off right before the deed is done. Yeah, I mean, that's just good sense. It's just good sense, because you never know.
Yeah, I mean, we all have a dead man switch that'll take out our business partner if something happens to us, right?
What?
Hi Tanner.
Hey.
Hello from America.
Hello, Tanner. What time is it in Australia, Tanner? Is it no, because we meet with Ruben and Elliot at about this time, so I'm going to predict 1 p.m. No, Western Australia. Shit, I'm off. 11 a.m. I don't know. I'm moving on to the slide.
Let's move on.
All right. Here is a slide about Shaolin, who has changed a lot since the last book, and we're going to talk about the ways that she changed and continues to change. Yalb grinned. What happened to you in Carbranth? Your first trip with us, you were so timid. You looked like you'd faint at the mere thought of sailing away from your homeland. Shallan hesitated, then found herself blushing. This is somewhat foolhardy, isn't it? Hanging from a moving ship and sticking your head in the water, Yalb said. Yeah, kind of, a little. Do you think we could stop the ship? Yalb laughed, but went jogging off to speak with the captain, taking her query as an indication she was still determined to go through with the plan. And she was. What did happen to me, she wondered. The answer was simple. She'd lost everything. She'd stolen from Yasna Kholin, one of the most powerful women in the world, and in doing so had not only lost her chance to study as she'd always dreamed, but had also doomed her brother and her house. She had failed utterly and miserably, and she'd pulled through it. She wasn't unscathed. Her credibility with Yasna had been severely wounded, and she'd felt that she had all but abandoned her family. But something about the experience of stealing Yasna's soulcaster, which had turned out to be a fake anyway, then nearly being killed by a man she thought was in love with her, well, she now had a better idea of how bad things could get. It was as if, once, she had feared the darkness, but now she had stepped into it. She had experienced some of the horrors that awaited her here, terrible as they were, at least she knew. You always knew, a voice whispered deep inside of her. You grew up with horror, Shaolin. You just won't let yourself remember them. All right, Matt, let's talk about it. We've already kind of talked about her, but let's talk about her.
Yeah. So this comes very close to the start of the book, and I think this is telling us, almost directly telling us, the reader, like, this is going to be a different Shallan than the last book, because she was unexperienced, she was immature, she like her concerns were basically selfish. I mean, she was trying to protect her brothers, but also like she did a lot of kind of more selfish things, and she was kind of like flighty, and it was all very believable for like who she was and where we believed that she came from. Although we now learn that we had a wrong impression of what that was actually. And now it's like, okay, she's been through some shit, and she's gonna be a little bit tougher from now on. In fact, more than a little bit tougher, it turns out.
Yeah, and I mean, the fake it till you make it is kind of her mantra throughout the story. Like from this point on, this is kind of Yasna's lingering advice to her that eventually translates into amazing light weaving powers. But just basically like, establish yourself as the in command, in charge person, make yourself into that person, and then people will respond to it. And she's right, and that's part of what she does throughout the story. I am a little bit worried about Shallan. I mean, there's this interesting stuff going on in the story. Like, I feel like the character of Kaladin by the end of this book, I'm a little worried he's kind of arced out. I don't know what's left to do with that character, but with Shallan, the ending is really beautiful because she's both now one of the Knights Radiant and also has this really complicated mess with the ghost whatever. What are they called? Ghost whatevers? I don't remember.
The Ghost Bloods.
Ghost Bloods, yeah. And so there's definitely still like a push and pull going on in her character between her identities, right? I love that moment where she like, you know, Shallan is my identity. That's who I am. This other person is just someone I made up. And the guy's like, I don't think so. Like, there's a lot there still. And I think like we're going to talk about this several times throughout these slides, but there's this idea of how far can the lie take you? How much can you work to make the lie real? And will it ever be real enough? You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm just responding to your point about Kaladin being arced out. Like, I think that he still seems to like hate Light Eyes a lot.
Yeah, but now he is one.
But now he is one. But like, I think that that's actually potentially a fun thing to do with him, is be like, okay, well, how do you deal with this, right? How do you, like, isn't that an interesting potential place for a story to go? Is like, how does a person like him deal with the fact that they have literally become the thing that they hated?
I guess that's kind of, I mean, he is that in all but like official eye color in this book though, and that's a lot of his struggle too. I don't know. Like, yes, there's stuff you can do with Kaladin. I'm sure we've got more to do with him, but it's like I'm a little Neo at the end of the Matrix with him right now. We're like, okay, what do we do in the sequel to this? And those movies failed to really come up with something interesting, I thought.
Yeah.
And so,
sure.
I mean, like, yeah, I need to show more trust. I loved this book, and I need to show more trust in Sanderson that he's going to do something interesting. But like, when I look at these two characters, I'm much more interested in where Shallan's going than I am interested in Kaladin.
Right. I mean, so I think I don't remember if you said in this conversation or if this was before we started recording, but this is Shallan's book and the previous book was Kaladin's book.
Yeah.
And the thing that makes that the most true is that in the last book, we had the intermittent, very frequent, actually, flashbacks to Kaladin's youth. And we got to understand his relationship with his parents and his brother and the Light Eyes family that lived in the town and how he ended up in the military.
Yeah.
And all this stuff is very detailed. We didn't get any of that with Shallan. Now it's the opposite. Now we get the full backstory of Shallan rolled out to us, and really nothing from Kaladin. We're just in the present with Kaladin. So I think that's a really interesting choice, actually. And speaking of patterns, like, I can't help but wonder if the next book isn't going to be, I don't know, Dalinar.
It's 100% going to be Dalinar flashbacks. Like, I think I'm not taking any outside information. I think the pattern is here. Yeah.
And he seems to be the clear third protagonist, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then the fourth book, as just throwing out a guess, because it's called Rhythm of War, I bet that's going to be the Parshendi chick's book, who we see fall down the cliff and die, but she's not dead.
She's totally dead.
There's 100% no way she's dead. So I think that's going to be hers. And that, I mean, that's a fun structure. I like that. I like it a lot, and we do have a slide on her flashback, so we're going to talk about that in some more detail. But I agree with you, like that's what sets the standard of this is the Shallan book for sure. You keep getting me to say it your way, and I don't like it.
I mean, definitely, as I said last time, it shouldn't have been spelled this way if it was supposed to be Shallan. But now I've heard it said Shallan enough times on the audiobook that I've learned it that way.
I mean, this is just Cuthbert all over again for those of you that read The Dark Tower. God,
Cuthbert.
I hate that.
And Elen, yeah.
Tanner said that Tanner agrees with us that Shallan did not enjoy her in Way of Kings. Really enjoys her now. Yeah, I think we said that before you had joined, Tanner. But yeah, that's exactly where I'm at. I did a whole 180 on her.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking a lot about the Wheel of Time while reading this, actually, which was a series that was very important to me in my youth, and I remembered a lot of instances where there would be characters where I'd just be like, oh my god, what is the point of this character? And then they would like go on to become this incredible badass in like a very earned, deliberate way,
Mm-hmm.
and it just like become some of my favorite characters ever, and
Yeah.
that's you know, and I know that Sanderson was influenced by the Wheel of Time also, so that can
Yeah.
kind of see the connections in terms of maybe how he's thinking about how he's building his stories.
Yeah. And blushing is Sanderson's pulling on braids, obviously. You know, we said that we talked about this on a different podcast, but I never noticed how much Sanderson has characters blush until you pointed it out. And I cannot, like, it's every time it's like, it's highlighted for me in my book. I'm just like, oh, someone's blushing again. He just really likes to have to note when characters blush.
But you know what? Even in so here's the thing. In this book, they actually go out of their way to point out that Shallan blushes like an unusual amount,
Sure.
like in the text, and then that to me that makes it okay now. Actually, I'm like, oh, like Shallan is just a character who's easily flustered. That's who she is.
Yeah.
Sanderson doesn't just think that people are going around just blushing whenever anyone says anything borderline offensive or risque, because they don't. That's not true. Also, I forgot that she's like extremely pale complexioned and a redhead,
Yeah.
and so even a slight blush will actually show up on a person who has that complexion.
Yeah, I mean that's like you eat a strawberry and your face is gonna blush.
Yeah, right. I mean, to make me blush, you have to like insult my family's honor to my face or something. But that's because
Hey Matt, has that ever happened? What
no,
in
I
this
don't think so.
hypothetical situation? What like who is walking up to you and insulting your family's honor?
I just wish that would happen, because that would be more exciting than most things that happen.
Yes, the Freemans, more like the
Unfreemans.
yes. And then they brand your dad on the head with a slave brand.
Yeah.
Would you blush? Would you blush?
I blush. I blush fiercely. Which I don't know what that means.
Oh, I'm
blush,
sorry.
but like, oh, blushing.
Yeah.
All right. Next slide. Here we meet Pattern, my favorite character.
Ooh.
Shallan's magic power inducing spren. Shallan sat again on her box on the ship's deck, though she now wore a hat on her head, a coat over her dress, and a glove on her free hand. Her safe hand was, of course, pinned inside its sleeve. The chill out here on the open ocean was something unreal. The captain said that far to the south, the ocean itself actually froze. That sounded incredible, but she'd like to see it. She'd occasionally seen snow and ice in Jacques during the odd winter, but an entire ocean of it? Amazing. She wrote with gloved fingers as she observed the spren she named Pattern. At the moment, he had lifted himself up off the surface of the deck, forming a ball of swirling blackness, infinite lines that twisted in ways she could never have captured on the flat page. Instead, she wrote descriptions, supplemented with sketches. Food, Pattern said. The sound had a buzzing quality, and he vibrated when he spoke. Yes, Shallan said, we eat it. She selected a small lima fruit from the bowl beside her and placed it in her mouth, then chewed and swallowed. Eat, Pattern said. You make it. And to you. Yes, exactly. He dropped down, the darkness vanishing as he entered the wooden deck of the ship. Once again he became part of the material, making the wood ripple as if it were water. He slid across the floor, then moved up the box beside her to the bowl of small green fruits. Here he moved across them, each fruit's rind puckering and raising with the shape of his pattern. Terrible, he said, the sound vibrating up from the bowl. Terrible? Destruction! What? No, it's how we survive. Everything needs to eat. Terrible destruction to eat! He sounded aghast. He retreated from the bowl to the deck. Pattern connects increasingly complex thoughts, Shallan wrote. Abstractions come easily to him. Early, he asked the questions, why? Why you? Why be? I interpreted this as asking me my purpose. When I replied, to find truth, he easily seemed to grasp my meaning, and yet some simple realities, such as why people would need to eat, completely escaped him. Yet...
All right, so let's talk about Pattern. Why is Pattern your favorite character? And also, I'm just so glad that this was your slide, so we got to hear your Pattern voice.
I like patterns. It's so fun. So I mean, just in general, just kind of a general world building thing that I like is that obviously Sanderson had always planned for Shallan to become a radiant, a magic user. Um, and he obviously had this idea that the magic users would have a spren associated with them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so cool how he gives each of the spren like very different character, very different appearance, wildly different way of like manifesting their power and their influence, and like what they can do is totally different.
Yeah.
And like it just makes it fun, right? Because like it would have been not disappointing. It would have been actually like normal and expected if like Kaladin has a little fairy, and then Shallan has a little fairy. Like that's what you would expect, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, yeah, there's her fairy, but like no, her fairy is this weird, buzzing little like goblin, amorphous goblin guy who just creeps around on the walls and has a weird voice, and like is really philosophical and like she has to teach him stuff about the world, which
Yeah.
of course gives us a lot of insight into who Shallan is based on like how she chooses to explain things to him. So
Yeah, you're exactly right, because like look at this part right here. Like, what is your purpose? Her response is to find truth, which makes sense. As a scholar, she's interested in truth. But the contradiction at the heart of Shallan is she's a liar, and she has built and constructed this lie that is her entire life. And Pattern is like super into truth and lies and the ways in which lies become truth. Like I don't know if like we call Syl an honor spren. I don't know if they've actually directly called Pattern a lie spren or whatever, but like it seems like that's what's going on here, right?
yeah,
He's really into the ways in which truth and lies are constructed, and how that develops on a person, and what how the person can become a lie, and he's really into that, and of course that reflects her, and so he's kind of there to push her towards her realization. We're gonna get to slide to it in a minute, but I just the moments of where like he talks about her past and the book just goes, and she just stopped listening to him until he was finished
yeah.
talking. It's so good.
I love that. That was like I don't know about my favorite part, but I love that moment because I was like, oh shit, like she's got some stuff buried deep.
Yeah.
Because like that was a great moment, because he's like, what do you mean, we've totally done this, we've done this before when you were young, remember? And you're like, what? And then she and you're like,
which
oh
is
god.
I mean,
Yeah.
I feel bad. We should hold on to this because there is a whole slide about it. But yeah, that's a really fascinating just like structural choice in the narrative, because it kind of breaks the rules of what Sanderson has done so far.
Sure.
Yeah, I like Pattern a lot too, and I agree with you. Like, if all Spren were just like Syl, I think that would be a little lame. We learn that Syl is not just like an encapsulation of what these godlike Spren are. She's just very specific to her type, and that is, it makes sense why her and Kaladin were joined together, just like it makes sense why Shaolin and hers were joined together. And we have our boy Dalinar, who gets his spren, which is the Stormfather at the end of the book, and then his son gets his own, which we don't know much about. I forget his name. What's the other prence's name? It starts with an R. I'm totally blanking on it.
Somebody will tell us. I don't remember.
Glasses guy.
Renarin.
Sure.
Yeah, Renarin. Yep, I was right. Okay. Yes. The spren. It's funny because like I was just confused and kind of annoyed by the spren in the last book. I mean, the concept of them.
Well, I mean, they just seemed like a thing that that just was like a flavor thing that he threw into the world that I think would have fundamentally changed behavior in the world more than it did. Like if you have like embarrassment spren pop up on your head like every time you're embarrassed, like that's going to fundamentally change how people interact with each other.
Yeah, I mean, why even mention that you're blushing if they're purple little amorphous ghosty things gushing out of your hair or whatever, it's like but the metaphysics of them is coming into focus, and now I believe that Sanderson's actually doing something pretty clever, because it's like they they sort of reflect human concepts, basically.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's like the interaction. Like we learn about we still don't have everything, but we learn a little bit more about the heralds, and this is all kind of wider scope stuff that I barely give a shit about. But we learn the heralds had their honor blades, which is what gave people power, and then the Spren were like, "Oh, that's cool. We're gonna do that too," and so they did, and then apparently there was betrayal. I don't know exactly what that means, but there was, and
Yeah.
and it's inevitable again. I don't know. It's cool.
Yeah.
I really didn't give a shit about the magic system in these books for a long time, and having the Spren like attached to it in interesting ways, and the reveal that the Spren are the weapons also was very cool.
That was very cool. Like you just said, watching a person figure out their magic powers is always like kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
But watching a person figure out their magic powers, if their magic powers are literally like this creature, who they're also having to get to know as a character, that's way more interesting.
Sure, absolutely.
Miss Evil Doom reminds us of Renarin's best quote. Battlefield treatment for epilepsy.
Oh, Kaladin. Yeah, he's just has such good knowledge, that guy.
Yeah. I mean, that's going to be his arc, though, is like he was supposed to be a healer, not a killer,
mm-hmm,
right?
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't even recognize this fact yet, even though we do.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, let's move on to our next slide. This, as we talked about, these are the flashback sequences in Words of Radiance, and this is the very first one that we go through Shaolin's flashback sequence. So I wanted to use this slide to kind of just talk about these specifically. 6 years ago, which, by the way, is also the amount of time since Yasna and everything went down. So, 6 years ago was a watershed moment in this world, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
The world ended, and Shaolin was to blame. Pretend it never happened, her father whispered. He wiped something wet from her cheek. His thumb came back red. I'll protect you. Was the room shaking? No, that was Shaolin, trembling. She felt so small. 11 had seemed old to her once, but she was still a child. So small. She looked up at her father with a shudder. She couldn't blink. Her eyes were frozen open. Father started to whisper, blinking tears. Now go to sleep in chasms deep, with darkness all around you. A familiar lullaby he'd always used to sing to her. In the room behind him, dark corpses stretched out on the floor. A red carpet, once white. Though rock and dread may be your bed, so sleep, my baby dear. Father gathered her into his arms, and she felt her skin squirming. No, this affection wasn't right. A monster should not be held in love. A monster who killed, who murdered. No, she could not move. Now comes the storm, but you'll be warm. The wind will rock your basket. Father carried Shaolin over the body of a woman in white. Little blood there. It was the man who bled. Mother lay face down, so Shaolin couldn't see the eyes. The horrible eyes. Almost, Shaolin could imagine that lullaby was the end to a nightmare, that it was night and she had awakened screaming, and her father was singing to her to sleep. The crystals fine will glow sublime, so sleep, my baby dear. They passed Father's strongbox set into the wall. It glowed brightly, light streaming from the cracks around the closed door. A monster was inside. And with a song, it won't be long. You'll sleep, my baby dear. With Shaolin in his arms, Father left the room and closed the door on the corpses. Okay, so this is kind of our introduction to Shaolin's backstory, which will later be filled in. This was her mother and another man that were planning on murdering her for the powers she had. No, no sign, no singing. I'm not gonna. Nobody wants me to do that, especially with my voice the way
also,
it is right now.
You don't know what tune it should be.
Yeah, it's true.
So I mean, I'm gonna draw attention to what I see as the obvious, most fun part, which is the line, Father gathered her into his arms, and she felt her skin squirming. No, this affection wasn't right. A monster should not be held in love. A monster who killed, who murdered. So what's fun about that is, obviously, now we know that this means Shallan is the monster who should not be held in love. Shallan is the monster who kills. But when you're reading it the first time, and especially based on the context surrounding it and what we are led to believe about her father, you could believe that what she means is like her skin is squirming because her father is the monster.
Yeah, because he's touching her. Yeah,
because he's touching her. But the way it's written, it's so delightfully ambiguous. Like it even the interpretation that it's her is actually the more correct one, English wise, but because of the context, I think I definitely like just interpreted it as like, he killed him and she witnessed it.
Yeah.
You do get the sense that something weird is going on, but it's not at all obvious. At least it wasn't obvious to me at this point that it was her who had done it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of weirdness going on here. And I mean, like, I honestly, when I was reading this, I had forgotten so much of the first book. So, like, the eyes, the horrible eyes. Like, if you remember that when people die by Shardblade, their eyes, like, get that creepy look on them. Like, you'll be, oh, this is a Shardblade death. But I had forgotten that. So the eyes line to me just didn't mean anything at the time. Honestly, I had forgotten that Shaolin had a Shardblade. And, like, I reached out to you and was like, did we know this? And you're like, yeah, it happened at the end of the last book. And I was like, oh, I forgot that.
I'm pretty sure it did, and I didn't just like spoil you because I'm pretty sure I remembered her using
did,
her shard blade at the end of the last book.
Yeah, once you said it I remembered it. But
Yeah.
I did not while I was reading this.
It's funny because like I had thought that what happened was like her father had a shard blade, and at some point she killed her father and inherited his shard blade. Like that's what I thought was what happened. And then as this story went on, I was like, oh no, her father doesn't have a shard blade. Oh, her brother has a shard blade. Maybe she accidentally or has to kill her brother, and that's how she gets the shard blade. So I kept being like, where did the shard blade come from? And I definitely didn't put it together.
Sure. Oh man, so there's so much here, right? Because like the fascinating thing about this thing is, and I don't want any of this to be misconstrued as me saying her father is not that bad of a guy, because he definitely is. Her father is indeed a monster, but I think he's a monster who held on to a lie for 6 years, and that lie destroyed him and his entire family because all her brothers were convinced that he killed their mother, and that turned them all against him. And so like he held on to this lie, he allowed this to happen, and it just completely destroyed all them and destroyed himself as well. It's a really tragic story, and there's something really sad to the idea that when she is murdering her father, she's singing the same lullaby to him that he sung to her in this moment, where he's like legitimately, I think, trying to comfort her after she did something awful that she doesn't even fully understand. That we learn it was in self-defense that she was trying to be murdered by her mother. That her mother seems like was more of a monster than her father was, at least at the time. Was trying to murder her for the things she could do. And yeah, as Sign is saying, the lie became truth because everyone. I mean, if everyone believes a lie, then isn't it just the truth then?
And then he does ultimately kill his wife. It's just a different wife.
Yeah, that's true.
So it literally becomes true.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really sad, and I think there's really something absolutely horrifying about the moment where she's singing this lullaby to him as she chokes him to death. And it's not like he doesn't. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve what he gets. He's really far gone by that point and had just murdered a woman. But man, it's just sad, and this is why like there's real darkness inside Shaolin, and I'm really interested to see the way this comes out in future novels.
Yeah, I mean, by the end of this book, I was like, I would not have guessed, based on the character that we knew in the previous book, that she had killed both of her parents by her own hand.
And then the poison, there was not enough of it, so she strangled him to death with a chain. Jesus Christ! Yeah,
and stabbed her mother in the heart, basically. So
yeah. Wow. That's a lot, right? That's a lot.
And of course, just like in our culture, their lullabies are actually nightmarish for some reason.
Wait, what?
I mean, the lullaby is the rock and dread may be your bed, so sleep may be dear.
Yeah,
it's about like being tossed into a chasm.
Yeah, that's fucked up.
Yeah.
The wind will rock your.
Now comes the storm, but you'll be warm because it's
the high storm wind will rack your basket. Yeah, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
You'll be fine, kiddo.
Yeah.
She does go to sleep in a chasm. Yeah. With darkness all around her.
She does. It's true. It's a good point.
There's another lie becoming truth. Yeah.
All right. Next slide. So here this is our first interlude where we introduce Eshonai, the Parshindi war leader. What would you do, sister? Vinley asked, if you and this Colin were actually to stop trying to kill each other long enough to have a conversation? I'd sue for peace. We murdered his brother, Vinley said. We slaughtered King Gavilar on a night when he'd invited us into his home. That is not something the Alethi will forget or forgive. Eshonai unfolded her arms and flexed a gauntleted hand. That night, a desperate plan made between herself and 5 others. She had been part of it despite her youth, because of her knowledge of the humans. All had voted the same. Kill the man, kill him and risk destruction, for if he had lived to do what he told them that night, all would have been lost. The others who had made the decision with her were dead now. I have discovered the secret of storm form, Vinley said. What? Eshonai stood up straight. You were to be working on a form to help, a form for diplomats or for scholars. Those will not save us, Vinley said, to amusement. If we wish to deal with the humans, we will need the ancient powers. Vinley, Eshonai said, grabbing her sister by the arm. Our gods! Vinley didn't flinch. The humans have surge binders. Perhaps not. Could have been an honor blade. You fought him. Was it an honor blade that struck you, wounded your leg, sent you limping? Her leg ached. We don't know which of the songs were true, Vinley said. Though she said it to resolve, she sounded tired, and she drew exhaustion spren. They came with the sound like wind, blowing in through the windows and doors like jets of translucent vapor before becoming stronger, more visible, and spinning around her head like swirls of steam. My poor sister. She worked herself as hard as the soldiers do. If the surge binders have returned, Vinley continued, we must strive for something meaningful, something that can ensure our freedom. The forms of power, Eshonai.
All right, Matt, this is our slide where we get to talk about Eshonai and Stormform and the Voidbringers and all this stuff.
Okay.
I really like this character, and I love the tragedy of her story. It's really, I mean, we only get to see her in interludes. I think there's an Eshonai chapter in every single interlude. I believe that's true. We kind of get to see her journey in these fragmented moments of horror. Like this one, like, you know, you're so hopeful. Like, this is a woman who wants peace, who like, and like, you're reading a book, so you kind of know that's not going to happen. But like that brief moment where they're meeting they actually convince the Alethi through Dalinar to like come meet to talk peace. And you're like, oh yes, this might happen. And then by the time she's there, she's Stormform and terrible. And I don't know. What did you think of Eshonai?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, she's great. It's the makings of a tragedy. We begin to understand, you know, previously we'd seen the Parshendi as aliens. You know, they were Klingons. They were just the bad guys.
They're crap
Now
people.
we realize they have a whole culture. They have a very interesting culture. They have this cool thing where they can change forms. She actually seems to think that she had a good reason for killing the old king, because like he had this plan that he wanted to do something that she believed was going to bring back these, I'm not exactly sure what the gods are supposed to be, but bring back the gods, which the Parshendi see as being like the worst thing that could happen. I mean, I may be blanking on something there, or just missing something. Maybe we haven't learned it yet.
Yeah, haven't quite. I think we learn a lot in this book, but I haven't quite like sussed it out, because like it seems like what Gavilar was working towards was bringing back surge binding, right? Like to bring back and seeking the return of the Voidbringers, like bringing back the old times and the magics of the old times, and that's through the gods of the old times, and that it's of course the greatest irony that like in trying to prevent that from happening, Eshonai like actually participates in it by becoming the Voidbringers.
Seemingly, what's interesting to me is I'm still completely unclear on whether the Parshendi are actually the Voidbringers, or whether that's kind of a red herring.
It's possible, yeah.
Maybe I'm overthinking this.
Well, look, I mean, let's be honest about Sanderson here. Like, what Sanderson does is he has a world in which there's a written history, and everyone believes things and makes choices based on the written history, and then at some point we learn that everything in the written history was inaccurate, and we were totally wrong about everything. And so like there's a lot written about the Voidbringers being these scary things with red eyes that bring upon the Everstorm, and like obviously like not good, right? Like what's happening at the end of this book, not desirable. But yeah,
Right.
I mean like this is kind of the perfect thing to be like, oh, we got it wrong, we misunderstood.
Yeah. Well, also just the fact that every time Dalinar goes into his visions of the past, he's seeing all these like nightmare monsters and things, but he never sees what we would recognize as a Parshendi.
Yeah, because like the storm form Parshendi are different looking, but they're still recognizably Parshendi, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think there's more going on than we have realized, basically. But yeah, I mean, Eshonai is a very fun character. I think it was that sort of like I was gonna say fun sadness, which is
No, you're right though. You're right though.
The part when she takes on storm form and you realize like she realizes like, oh, this is a terrible mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And then and then like she hears the voice of like mercy and compassion screaming in her mind all the time now. And she's like, yeah, basically she's been possessed.
Yeah.
And she's like aware of it, but she's like, you know what, now I'm evil. So oh well. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah. It is. I like it a lot. And I think fun sad is the perfect way to describe it, because yeah, I mean like you're watching this tragedy unfold, and I do think it's interesting that we leave the story with her tale unfinished, right? Like we see the next time we see her after all this goes down is when she's fighting Aladdin, right? And we see him defeat her. And then we don't see her from that point on. And again, like she's dead, but she just falls down. She just falls down the chasm. She's not dead.
Yeah.
Not dead.
Yeah. Right.
No named character in this book falls down a chasm and dies. Like none of them.
That's true. That's true.
So yeah, I mean, I think this is really great. I think you're right. Like I think who was it? It was Bishop who pointed out in The Way of Kings we had a Seth interlude in each one of the interludes. Like we had one with him, and I just felt like I just cared so much less about him. And it really isn't until the very end of this book that I finally was like, oh yeah, I like this guy now, and I'm into what Sanderson's doing with him. But I felt like because we're introduced to the listeners like through their culture that's very different and very interesting. Like I just immediately was in on Eshonai and everything that's going on there, and so I enjoyed her interludes way more than the assassins.
Yeah, me too. All right.
So after surviving an assassination attempt that Yasna unfortunately did not survive, Shaolin ends up in league with a thief, an assassin woman named Tin, and we have to... Or Tyne? Is it Tyne? Tin? Tyne? Tyne?
I think it's Tin.
Really? Okay. Is that like a Mistborn reference?
Sure.
Is she gonna swallow some tin?
She's gonna burn some tin is what she's gonna do.
She does. Bounty? Shaolin demanded. I gave promises to these men. Hush, Tin said. We're not alone in this camp, fool child. If you want us dead, all you need to do is let them overhear this conversation. We're not turning them in for money, Shaolin said more softly. Tin, I gave my word. Shaolin blushed. On the table, the span reed continued to write, oblivious to the fact that they weren't paying attention. It said something about a job Tin had done before. Tin, Shaolin said, Vatha and his men can be useful. Tin shook her head, walking over to the side of the tent, pouring herself a cup of wine. You should be proud of what you did here. You have barely any experience, yet you took over 3 separate groups, convincing them to put you, practically sphereless and completely without authority, in charge. Brilliant. But here's the thing. The lies we tell, the dreams we create, they're not real. We can't let them be real. This might be the hardest lesson you have to learn. She turned to Shaolin, her expression having gone hard, all sense of relaxed playfulness gone. When a good con woman dies, it's usually because she starts believing her own lies. She finds something good and wants it to continue. She keeps it going, thinking she can juggle it. One day more, she tells herself. One day more, and then... Tin dropped the cup. It hit the ground, the wine splashing blood red across the tent floor and Tin's rug. Red carpet. Once it was white. Your rug, Shaolin said, feeling numb. You think I can afford to haul a rug with me when I leave the shattered plains? Tin asked softly, stepping across the spilled wine, taking Shaolin by the arm. You think we can take any of this? It's meaningless. You've lied to these men. You've built yourself up. And tomorrow, when we enter that war camp, the truth will hit you like a slap in the face. You think you can actually get clemency for these men? From a man like High Prince Zadius? Excuse me. Don't be an idiot. Even if you get the con going with Dalinar, you want to spend what little credibility we can fake in order to free murderers from Dalinar's political enemy? How long do you think you could keep this lie going? Themes.
How do you make lies real? And lies are bad, but sometimes you need them, and it's so complicated and paradoxically contradictory. And did you pull the slide where she fucking kills her?
I did not.
Okay,
but we can talk about that here.
That was just pretty awesome, though.
Yeah, I mean, like she learns that it's this person that was in charge of the assassination of her mentor. And it's like, oops, I guess you'll die now. Shardblade.
I mean, I don't know. I found it extremely satisfying because she's like, it's a shame that you're just so naive and young and incompetent, and you'll just and you're just like, yeah, fuck you.
I think
Shalon's awesome.
I think this is actually, I mean, I think Sanderson wants us to think that Tin is right here, though. Like, the lies we tell, the dreams we create, they're not real. We can't let them be real. But Shalon is given the power to make these lies real. Like, right, she has that ability. She can imagine something and draw it, and it can become real. And so she is allowed to keep this con going more than any other con woman has ever been able to do, thanks to the power of light weaving. But I think she's right. Like, there is going to become a day when these lies blow up in your face. And I think that's the thing remaining in Shalon's thing, is this push and pull between the two sides of her, between the lies she's created and the truth, whatever that truth is. And these things are in conflict with each other, and she hasn't really reconciled those things yet. And that is what I think her story is going to be.
Yeah, I really like what the word Miss Evil Doom is using in the chat, which is transformation.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Earlier you said fake it till you make it, and the thing is, like, that is pretty much how everyone lives their lives in real life. Like, the way you transform into, a professional adult is you pretend to be one for a few years, and then one day you wake up and you realize that you are, and you're not pretending anymore. And I think Scott, you're probably now finding out that the way you turn into a dad is you pretend you know what you're doing.
Here, if those of you out there that are not parents, parents don't know what they're doing. Sometimes I just hold up my son and I'm like, holy shit, I'm responsible for this thing. I don't know what I'm doing. I read a book and now I can be a father?
Uh-huh.
Jesus.
Yeah. You didn't even have to read the book, Scott.
No, I did. That was optional.
That was an elective.
I think you're right. And it's interesting because I love this idea of transformation because, as Stithis is saying, she transforms the people around her. Like, she doesn't actually use soul casting like in this book at all, because she's kind of afraid of it still. But she is transforming everyone around her. She takes these men and transforms them, including like the asshole that we hated from the first book. Like, is it Gix or Gaz? I forget that guy.
Gaz. Yeah.
Gaz. Yeah.
It's funny because I forgot that was the same guy.
I totally forgot that was the same guy too until the book reminded me, and I'm like, oh yeah, that fucking asshole.
Yeah.
But like, it's so funny because Sanderson allows us to see him from Shaolin's perspective, and like a man transformed, a man who wants a second chance, a man who wants to abide by his oaths, and like, so you see him totally differently, and then you're kind of reminded by Kaladin that this is the asshole that treated him and all his men like shit, and you're like, wait a minute, I think that's fun. Like, I think it works better on me having not remembered the guy's name.
Right, and I mean, I think Shalon's character arc, or at least what we're doing in this book, is about second chances and redemption from terrible mistakes, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, she kind of had to do the things she did, but also she terribly regrets it and feels sad about it. Whereas um, Kaladin, I think, is much more straightforwardly just the victim of his circumstances. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
he made some mistakes as well, like going off to war. I think was probably a mistake that was all on him.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but he doesn't struggle with, like, oh, I made a terrible mistake in the same way that she does. And so the theme of like redemption and second chances, I think, is more hers than his. Um,
Yeah, and I think you're right. We haven't talked about Kaladin very much. We'll get to him, but we haven't
okay.
talked about it. I do like the way Sanderson uses the red carpet to connect. So like we have this whole thing, like Tin is giving this speech about the lies we tell, the thing, like they're not real and you need to deal with that. And then he connects this with the dropping the wine on the rug to Shaolin's past, right? And it's
Mhm.
just a really clever way of like, if you're reading along, he has manually connected the paragraph before it to this lie for you. So it's like
Yeah.
he's kind of almost writing in the margins, link this thing stuff with lies with her past. Link these things together. That's what I'm doing. Here it is. It's very clever.
Yeah. Just one last thing here. Like, I don't know if Sanderson's doing this like fully consciously and intentionally. Maybe he is. But okay, so you know how in the first Avengers movie, the Avengers, um, the way that they make you, the viewer, s- side with the concept of um, a massive franchise movie that's about 10 different heroes is by having everybody in the movie be really skeptical of it and having the villain make fun of the idea. And then you're like, fuck you, Loki. They can do it. Yeah, Avengers. And then by the end of the movie, you're like on their side. I think that
Sure.
I think that Tin is actually serving a similar purpose here, where Tin is like saying all of the stuff to Shallan that you probably were thinking at some point, at least in the first book. And but then you're like, but that's not fair because like she's grown since then, and like, and then that causes you to realize, oh, she has grown since then. So it's the fact that Tin is being so unfair to her that makes you kind of mentally side with Shallan even more than you did already.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's also the irony that like Tin doesn't realize that Shallan is not pretending to be the person she is, that she actually is. So like, it's just funny. It's like you don't belong in this camp, and they're going to discover your lie. And of course, the lie is actually that she's not that person.
Right.
But I mean, that's so funny because like then you connect that to the ending where like she's accused of not actually being this person. All this stuff is connecting and wrapping in on itself in really fun, clever ways. This is one of the reasons I like this book so much, is because like Sanderson's doing a lot with these concepts of identity and transformation and lies and truth and memory and all these things around this character. And yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like you want to side with her here. You want to believe she can do it. But I do think there's some truth to what Tin is saying here. And I think like Tin ends up dead because like she got too relaxed around Shallan. Like, you know,
Yeah.
she believed she just was enjoying. She like hitched herself to this woman who she thought she could manipulate into getting her, you know, a paid ticket to some money and then get out of there. And she wrong.
Yeah. A lot of great points in the chat. Sam and John are pointing out that her brand of soul casting is actually of surge binding. I mean, is actually called transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Which, yeah, okay,
Yeah,
spot on there, Sanderson.
I like
Um,
Miss Evil Doom's sentence right here. Shallan doesn't create things, but she emphasizes facets. Where wanted men turns into I came here wanting men.
yeah, and Miss Evil Doom also says she soul casts things by convincing objects to become other things,
Uh-huh.
the same way she does with people.
Yeah, I really liked the stick. You want to be fire? No, no, I
Yeah,
don't. No thanks. I just
yeah,
like think of that scene visually. You're just holding a stick. Come on, be fire.
yeah.
Be fire.
No, I'm
No,
I'm 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 good.
yeah, I'm good. I like stick. Stick is good. Stick is good for me.
Yeah, I mean the metaphysical implications of the idea that you can convince a thing to become another thing are just quite fun, actually.
It's a lot of fun, and I obviously I think this is a power that's going to be explored more in the future.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Moving on. Shallan learns about her light weaving power. She got out her pouch of spheres and breathed in some of the stormlight. Then she puffed it out in front of her, trying to shape it, meld it. Nothing. Next, she tried holding a very specific image in her head, herself, with one small change. Black hair instead of red. She puffed out the stormlight, and this time it shifted around her and hung for a moment. Then it too vanished. This is silly, Shallan said softly, stormlight trailing from her lips. She did a quick sketch of herself with dark hair. What does it matter if I draw it first or not? These pencils, the pencils don't even show color. It shouldn't matter, Pattern said, but it matters to you. I do not know why. She finished the sketch. It was very simple. It didn't show her features, only really her hair, everything else indistinct. Yet, when she used Stormlight this time, the image took and her hair darkened to black. Shallan sighed, Stormlight leaking from her lips. So, how do I make the illusion vanish? Stop feeding it. How? I am supposed to know this, Pattern asked. You are the expert on feeding. Shallan gathered all her spheres, several were now done, and set them on the seat across from her, out of reach. That wasn't far enough, for as her stormlight ran out, she breathed in using instincts she hadn't realized she had. The light streamed from across the carriage and into her. I'm quite good at that, Shallan said sourly, considering how short a time I've been doing it. Short time? Pattern said. But we first. She stopped listening until he was done. I really need to find another copy of Words of Radiance, Shallan said, starting another sketch. Maybe it talks about how to dismiss the illusions. That's great.
Yeah, so lots of stuff to talk about here. I mean, we kind of already talked about the light weaving quite a bit, but I think it's a really fun power that ties in thematically to what her journey is in this book just absolutely perfectly. I love it. I was just it's so satisfying when you realize what Sanderson's doing with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very everything just comes together, right?
Yeah.
It's very fun.
And how it's linked to her sketching. It shouldn't matter. You shouldn't have to do it that way, but because it's important to you, you do. And you wonder if that's going to always be the truth, if she's going to learn to do it without drawing it first.
Yeah. Well, and she had this almost, this preternatural sketching ability.
Mm-hmm.
And we always wondered, like, okay, what's up with that? Like what? Like, it's unusual. It's you don't just randomly give your character a trait like that.
And not just her. It's not just her sketching ability. It's just like her ability, her memorization ability. Like the whole taking a memory thing always seemed like super, super human.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of an interesting point because if, I'm not like bragging here, but like I can sketch pretty well if I have a photo to sketch from. Like that's just like a mechanical task. And so it kind of seems like it really, you may be right. Like it's actually her memory that is kind of the power that lets her be good at sketching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't like that's interesting too, because is that part of the gift of light weaving, or is that just a Shaolin original? Like, is this coming from some supernatural source? I mean, like the book makes it very clear that she's like better at pattern recognition and at memory than like anyone, like than like supernaturally good at this kind of thing. But like I don't think we're ever like textually told this is coming from pattern, that she's got this from her spren. So
right.
It's interesting, right?
I mean, it does seem magic because this book does make the extra step of saying like not only can she photographically remember like a person's face, but she can remember like text in a language she doesn't recognize.
Yeah, and the entire like layout of a canyon she's walking through like perfectly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then of course we get to the part that we talked about a little bit earlier where Pattern starts talking about her past and she just tunes it totally out, which is interesting, right? Because it's not like we're in first person perspective, like we're in a close third person, but the book kind of like breaks its rules here. Like there's no reason why we can't hear this other than Shaolin chooses not to hear it.
Yeah.
And so we don't get to hear it either.
Yeah. That's true. I think he's Sanderson's usually pretty close with his third person, so
Yeah, I mean it's very close,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I found it really interesting that like we just kind of just directly said you're not going to get to read this, reader, because Shaolin is no longer paying attention to it.
yeah, yeah. That reminds me, like the box in her father's safe, is
Mm-hmm.
that like pattern in the box, or is that something else that we don't know what it is
Yeah,
yet?
so her dad locked the shard blade in the
Okay,
box in his safe, which was Pattern. And then, of
okay,
course, Pattern immediately got out of there. But, like, I feel like her trauma allowed her to constantly see this bright, shining thing coming from the box, even though it wasn't in there.
right. And just avoid noticing Pattern's presence, since he was probably, I mean, it's probably like the thing with Syl, where he may have been around, but not in a way that was like noticeable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's
Yeah.
just trying to put things together.
Yeah. I wonder, like, I didn't pay attention. Do you remember in Way of Kings, is there indication that, like, Syl is, like, hovering around in the background in Kaladin's life before we see her?
I think yes. I think the scene where he first gets either the bow staff or the spear, and he does, like, an amazing martial arts demonstration for somebody who's never touched a spear before, and it's clearly like the wind sprin are um are like guiding him, but then we now kind of realize, no, it wasn't the wind sprin, it was Syl and his surge binding, basically.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I
Yeah, it
think
makes sense.
that's the only time I remember.
That's really cool. I like that. Speaking of Kaladin, we haven't really talked about him too much, so let's talk about the whiny asshole Kaladin. So yeah, I mean, like we said, he spent the entirety of the book basically like he's free. He's been put in charge of the King's Guard basically, but he hates all Light Eyes and he's whining the whole time and he doesn't trust anyone. And Syl is basically like, dude, you need to calm the fuck down. It's a whole thing, and then we get to this moment, which is one of the the most exciting moments in the book, where Adolin is like fighting four men at the same time, and he like heroically jumps into the pit with nothing but a spear, and they manage to defeat these men. And then, well, okay, I'll read it, and then we'll talk about it. They worked to the roar of the crowd as Adolin finally got free of the plate and stood up. Ahead, the king had stepped up beside the judge, one foot on the railing around the arena. He looked down at Adolin, who nodded. This is Adolin's chance, Kaladin realized. But it can be my chance, too. The king raised his hands, quieting the crowd. Warrior, duel master, the king shouted, I am greatly pleased by what you have accomplished today. This was a fight the like of which hasn't been seen in Alethkar for generations. You have pleased your king greatly. Cheering. I could do this, Kaladin thought. I offer you a boon, the king proclaimed, pointing to Adolin as the cheering quieted. Name what you wish of me or of this court. It shall be yours. No man, having seen this display, could deny you. The right of challenge, Kaladin thought. Adolin sought out Sadeas, who had stood and was making his way up the steps to flee. He understood. Far to the right, Amaram sat in his golden cloak. For my boon, Adolin shouted to the quiet arena, I demand the right of challenge. I demand the chance to duel High Prince Sadeas right here and now as redress for the crimes he committed against my house. Sadeas stopped up on the steps. A murmur ran through the crowd. Adolin looked as if he was going to say something more, but hesitated as Kaladin stepped up beside him. And for my boon, Kaladin shouted, I demand the right of challenge against the murderer Amaram. He stole from me and slaughtered my friends to cover it up. Amaram branded me a slave. I will duel him here, right now. That is the boon I demand. The king's jaw dropped. The crowd grew very, very still. Besides him, Adolin groaned. Kaladin didn't spare either one a thought. Across the distance, he met the eyes of Bright Lord Amaram, the murderer.
Who else is cringing? Anybody else cringing?
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a great scene, though.
It's wonderful. I mean, like this is what I think. This is the scene I was thinking about when I was like, Sanderson makes the right choice every time there's a choice, right? We have this amazing heroic action scene where Kaladin like is a badass and like manages without armor or a soul blade, manages to completely kick these guys' ass. He uses some of his surge binding a little bit, and also uses his ability to touch a soul blade and have everyone hear the screams of the dead Spren, which is actually horrifying. Like, is the poor little thing just like screaming the entire time it's summoned, and you just can't hear it unless you have surge binding? It's great.
Yes.
That's terrifying. So it's like this wonderful scene, and like you're so proud of your character, and you're like, it's great. And then as soon as it's over, he goes back into his whiny little asshole thing. It's like, this is Adelin's chance, but it can be my chance too. It's like, no, you dumb motherfucker. This is like, you need, I think there's a lot of desire, I think, to make your characters, especially a character like Kaladin, who's supposed to be like the very stereotypical like fantasy series like badass, like the one, you know. You need to allow him to make wrong, stupid decisions. Like, I think earlier in the book there was a moment where he got his arm chopped by the soul blade, and like I was actually kind of hoping that Sanderson would leave that arm dead, and he didn't. But this is basically him chopping off his own arm in this moment, because it's pure selfishness. It's ruining everything around you for your own desire, your own need, and he justifies it in his own way of like there are bigger things going on than your personal vendetta, as everyone around him is telling him, and he won't listen to it.
So the theme of Kaladin's character, now that we're talking about him, is basically obsession with getting revenge and getting justice for wrongs. And like Kaladin, he, you know, in the last book he was just focused on keeping his men alive. In this book, he has like the leisure time to just really nurse a grudge. And he spends the whole book just like obsessing about how everything is so unfair, and he's you know, this victim. And the thing is, it's all true. It's not like his life has not been horribly unfair.
Yeah.
But
it's not like the Light Eyes have not been incredibly cruel to him. Yeah.
Right. But he's clearly letting it warp him and turn him into a dark, vengeful villain, basically. Like, and this is why, you know, Syl is like, hey, like, she doesn't say this because maybe she doesn't know it, or maybe she can't say it, or because there's rules. But it's like, hey, like, I'm like an honor friend, and like you have to actually live like an honorable life, and you're like agreeing to all these terribly obviously dishonorable things, and you're telling yourself a narrative about how, well, this is just because I was wronged. And it's like, yeah, that's not, like honor probably is going to require you to just swallow that shit and just get on with it. And it's obviously like the book lets him make a lot of mistakes. Like, it lets him go pretty low, actually. Like, this isn't even this is not even close to his low point, actually.
No, because it's hilarious here. He fucks up in this moment, and he shifts the entirety of the blame for this moment on the king. It's not my fault that this happened. It's not my fault that all our plans were ruined, and Sadeas escaped to plot against us another day. It's the weak king's fault, and that he takes that anger and then translates that into, I'm going to help the assassination attempt on the king. And I think one of the things he argues to Syl later in the book is like, I have to protect people, and the only way to protect them is by killing this guy. Yeah. And you're just like, I don't think that adds up.
Right.
And I think you're right about Syl. Like, I don't know, like, she can't come right out and say it, you know. Like, what she does say to him is like, I don't like you when you're like this. You're not like yourself. Like, it's almost as if like part of the deal is you can't be like, no, this is the way you're supposed to behave. It's like, you got to figure this shit out for yourself. Right. Just like, I can't tell you what the words are. You need to figure out what the words are.
Yeah, I mean, I think the person has to grow into the person who deserves the power. And if you just tell them, oh, here's the trick, like it's not you're not really being honorable. If you know the cheat codes. You're just doing what you know you're supposed to do to get the power, which wouldn't then work, right? I think it's just great. It's just, I mean, this Sanderson is very good at piling on the characters with adversity and getting them to really low points such that you're like, really rooting for them to get out of it. And
Yeah. Yeah.
um it's like you said, it's just delightful, the writing choices that he makes for Kaladin specifically. I mean, interestingly, I think Shallan's arc is less like that, but more satisfying in different ways. I think Shallan and Kaladin have very different, like, textured arcs, which is why I think they complement each other nicely in this book.
Yeah, I mean, I think Shallan's arc to me is a lot more complex. I think
Mhm.
Kaladin has a very satisfying but a very standard fantasy story arc. Like the character learning what honor is feels very standard, but also like very satisfying. Like I pulled the slide where he has his moment of realization because it's a really fun moment. It's really great and it pays off on things really well. But yeah, Shallan is much more complicated, at least at this point.
Yeah. All right. Shall we move on?
Yeah, let's do it. You know what time it is?
It's lift o'clock. All right. She waited until the guards had walked farther away. All right, she whispered to Wendell. You got to do what I say. I do not. Sure you do. I captured you, just like in the stories. I came to you, Wendell said. Your powers come from me. Do you even listen to up the wall? Lift said, pointing. Wendell sighed, but obeyed, creeping up the wall in a wide looping pattern. Lift hopped up, grabbing the small handholds made by the vine, which stuck to the surface by virtue of thousands of branching stems with sticky discs on them. Wendell wove ahead of her, making a ladder of sorts. It wasn't easy. It was starving difficult with that bulge, and Wendell's handholds weren't very big, but she did it, climbing all the way to the near top of the building's dome, where windows peeked out at the grounds. She glanced toward the city. No sign of the man in the black uniform. Maybe she'd lost him. She turned back to examine the window. Its nice wooden frame held very thick glass, even though it pointed east. It was unfair how well Azamir was protected from high storms. They should have to live with the wind, like normal folk. We need to avoid bringing... Sorry, yeah. We need to avoid bringing that, she said, pointing at the window. Have you realized, Wendell said, that while you claim to be a master thief, I do all of the work in this relationship? You do all the complaining, too, she said. How do we get through this? You have the seeds? She nodded, fishing in her pocket, then in the other one, then in her back pocket. Ah, there they were. She pulled out a handful of seeds. I can't affect the physical realm except in minor ways, Wendell said. This means that you will need to use your investiture to... Lift yawned. Use investiture to... She yawned wider. Starving Voidbringers could never catch a hint. Wendell sighed. Spread the seeds on the frame.
Okay. There's a few things I want to talk about here, and I guess we'll start with Lift herself, which is just a really fun, delightful character. I love the concept of getting Stormlight from eating and how that plays out in her interlude, rushing across the palace, like frantically grabbing sausages and bread in order to just in time get enough power to get slick. I love, as people have said in the chat, she calls turning on her power becoming awesome, and then Lift became awesome.
Yeah.
It's really fun. I mean, you can tell Sanderson had a very, very good time writing this interlude. I mean, as people are saying, there's an entire book called Edge Dancer that's a spin-off that's just Lift. So, like, he had such a good time writing this character that he decided to write a whole book about her. It's really fun. I think she's really fun. But the other thing I want to talk about here is one of the things I think Sanderson is doing throughout the course of this book, using these interludes, is we keep getting little vignettes of different people who have been joined by Spren and given surge binding powers. And it allows us to see a shape of the world in which this is not just happening to our named characters. This is happening everywhere with everyone, right? Like there's something happening. There's a movement happening in the world where these relationships are forming between Spren and people, and surge binding is back and the world is changing. Like I said, we have the one with the cobbler who sadly does not make it out of his interlude alive because of this man in black that we see here, who we learn at the end of the book is a herald, which I don't know what those guys are yet. I went back, Matt, and I read not the prologue of the first book, but the prelude where like the herald, I still don't know what the fuck's going on in there at all. And I was just like, this is still terrible. I hate it. But but I mean, I think it's a really fun way of opening up the scope of the world. Like, this is something actually I had a problem with in some of the other interludes in the last book, because I just was very confused on like, what is the point of all this? And I know it'll come eventually, but it didn't come within the book proper. When I was reading these ones, when I was reading these little vignettes about the new surge binders, like it was very obvious to me what Sanderson was doing with this. Like, the world is changing. Look, we get to see that this is widespread. It's not just our protagonist and his friends. Like, this is happening everywhere.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, not much to add really. I mean, yeah, very 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 fun, like very, remarkably fast, getting me to care about this character, to love this character, and then to be really invested in her plight, and scared of this man in black who we never met before, but he like immediately struck me as like a cool, formidable villain. I think I missed actually that he was supposed to be a herald.
I think he meets with Seth at the very end of the book, right?
Okay.
To give him a new blade, which I don't understand. A different spren, a creepy, the creepy spren, I think is what they're called. Creepy spren.
That's this guy. I thought that was
I'm pretty sure that's this guy.
I thought that was somebody else for some reason.
I'm pretty sure they said the man in black with the weird scar on his face.
Okay, you're probably right. I don't know.
And he said he was a herald.
I might need to recheck some things because that's not what I remember, but I think I may have just been mistaken.
Look, man, I could be wrong. I read 1,000 pages in 6 days, so. Okay,
yeah, people in chat are
saying
that you're right. So yeah.
Yeah.
I think I might have been thrown off by like the voice actor doing a voice that sounded like somebody else, and me thinking it was that guy. So.
Yeah, with the sword that wants to destroy some evil. There's nothing ominous about that at all. Oh, that's the sword from. Oh, I finally understand why you guys made me read Warbreaker. I get it now. Matt, do you get it now?
It's the best character in the book.
It's the sword from that book.
I love that sword.
I literally had a conversation with Matt yesterday that was like, why the fuck do these people have me read that book? I don't understand. Well, hilarious. There we go. It's the sword from the book.
It came from another dimension. It must have come through one of those doorways.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. I love it now.
Do you think it was the grapefruit? No, it was it was 13. Anyway.
You can't, like, most of the people in this chat probably have not read The Dark Tower, so they don't know what you're talking about.
This is called Easter eggs, Scott. When I say things that make sense to no one, that's called Easter eggs, okay?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think basically this is just fun. And I think Wendell as a Spren seems to, like, remember and understand a lot more. Like, it's like both Pattern and Syl, like, are confused and don't remember a lot of stuff, but Wendell seems to remember... and know how this works a lot more.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if this character meets up with our characters, because Wendell definitely seems to have, like, the book on surge binding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're also being told that the Sword Master is a character from Warbreaker. See, the problem is I read these books months apart, and I
literally don't even remember who Vasher is.
He's the guy that teaches them how to fight with the shard blades, I think.
Okay, whatever.
You know the guy that is teaching them how to shard blade guy?
Yeah, I do.
Apparently he talks about colors a lot. I don't remember this, but
okay, sure.
Oh, it's a spoiler. Well, the book's ruined for me now. We're never reading another Sanderson book ever again.
Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, that just made me want to find out what the fuck's going on there. So
I mean, I think like half the reason why the Cosmere stuff doesn't interest me is because I miss every single one of the connections. I mean,
yeah, it's not like King where he's like, this is the same thing because I'm using the name. It's like, no, you're supposed to actually be paying attention.
Yeah.
Now I feel stupid. Does the sword talk? Or
the Nightblood? Yeah, the sword says to Seth at the end of the book, "You want to go destroy some evil," which is like directly a quote from Warbreaker. I don't know how we didn't. It's been like a whole year.
God, I'm an idiot.
Now, Mike, I can't. I think Mike's just bullshitting us now. But honestly, Mike, I like, sure, it could be true.
Uh-huh.
All right. So we're back with Kaladin and his whiny little assholedom, and Sanderson does a really clever thing here, which is take our two protagonist characters and dump them down a pit together and force them to interact with each other for like 100 pages, so we can kind of put their conflict to a head, also while stripping Kaladin of his powers, which is just really perfect. And I mean, I want to talk about this part a little bit for a while because I think it's very good. All right, Kaladin said. Here it is. I can imagine how the world must appear to someone like you, growing up pampered with everything you want. To someone like you, life is wonderful and sunny and worth laughing over. That's not your fault. I shouldn't blame you. You haven't had to deal with pain or death like I have. Sorrow is not your companion. Silence. Shaolin didn't reply. How could she reply to that? What? Kaladin finally asked. I'm trying to decide how to react, Shaolin said. You see, you just said something very, very funny. Then why aren't you laughing? Well, it isn't that kind of funny. She handed him her satchel and stepped onto a small dry rise of rock running through the middle of a deep pond on the chasm floor. The ground was usually flat, all of that creme settling, but the water in this pool looked a good 2 or 3 feet deep. She crossed with hands out to her sides, balancing. So let me see, she said as she stepped carefully. You think I've lived a simple, happy life full of sunshine and joy, but you also imply that I've got dark, evil secrets, so you're suspicious of and even hostile to me. You tell me I'm arrogant and assume that I consider dark eyes to be playthings, but when I tell you what I'm trying to do to protect them, and everyone else, you imply I'm meddling and should just leave well enough alone. She reached the other side and turned about. Would you say that's an accurate summary of our conversations up to this point, Kaladin Stormblessed? He grimaced. Yes, I suppose. Wow, she said. You sure do seem to know me well, particularly considering that you started this conversation by professing that you don't know what to make of me. An odd statement from someone who seems, from my perspective, to have figured it all out. Next time I'm trying to decide what to do, I'll just ask you, since you appear to understand me better than I understand myself.
Owned.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is really great, right? Because we have the perfect thing for Kaladin to come in contact with is a Light Eyes who's had a shitty, terrible life, right? Because, like, he has convinced himself that all Light Eyes are bad and the world is fundamentally broken, which, like, to your point earlier, it's not like he's wrong. It's not like there's a definite power dynamic in this world that to our standards is terrible and cruel. Like, that surely does exist, but, like, he's painting with too broad of a brush.
Yeah.
And
right.
just making broad decisions and refusing to see people as people. Like remember Dalinar last book gave up his like super amazing, expensive, cool looking shard blade just to save this one guy. Like the most extravagant and heroic kind of sacrifice he could possibly do. And Kaladin still doesn't really trust him throughout the entire book.
Yeah. And you know, here he's decided that he knows everything about Shallan, like basically just based on the fact that she's Light Eyes.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
He's very quick to judge people, quick to make assumptions, and Shallan gets to give him the "you suck" speech.
Mm-hmm. And we get to appreciate it on a whole deeper level, knowing and having just spent the last 800 or so pages reading about her incredibly depressing and sad and cruel, you know, childhood that she was forced to go through. So it's the dramatic irony here plays particularly deliciously as we just kind of get to see Kaladin, you know, logically ripped to shreds.
So just, I mean, like you were saying earlier about him making all the right choices in this book, Sanderson, that is, the idea of having them fall down to the pit and have to be stuck together with no powers and so forth is just such a great choice, right? Mm-hmm. It exposes all of these things about both characters really, and lets the themes breathe, and I think moves both of their characters forwards in meaningful ways.
Yeah.
I also really love their meet cute, where technically the first time they meet is when she's pretending to be a horn eater, but the second time they meet is when she's trying to get into the party or the meeting or whatever it is,
mm-hmm.
and they just like they just like start uh, uh, tearing each other apart verbally in an extremely satisfying way.
Just like they go to 11 like immediately.
Yeah.
It's perfect. I love it a lot too. Here's what I don't like though. I think we're doing a love triangle thing here, and I don't want to do a love triangle thing here. I really don't want this to happen, but it feels like that's what we're doing between
Yeah.
Adolin, Shaolin, and Kaladin.
I feel like the most likely outcome is that Adolin just dies horribly at some point.
Well,
And then
he did fucking murder a high prince at the end
he
of this book.
murdered Sadeas. Yeah, are we going to talk about that specifically?
I didn't pull a
'Cause
slide, so it's a free
that was,
flowing conversation. Let's talk about it now.
I mean, that was actually very shocking and sort of like felt un-Sanderson actually, because I was like, oh shit, like, I mean, this is, it's interesting because, you know, Kaladin struggled with these feelings of vengeance and just anger, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he
Mm-hmm.
conquered it and realized I don't I'm just gonna need to just be okay not getting my vengeance,
Yeah.
and just prioritizing the things that are more important in life. And Adolin never sets aside his vengeance. He it's like he's blinded by it. He's putting it in the center of all of their plans, even past the point where really Sadeas is kind of broken and beaten, you know, like from a tactical point of view. And then he just like snaps. He just like literally just snaps and strangles him to death.
Yeah.
Or stabs him, right?
Stabs him. Yeah.
But it's a violent, brutal, not, it's like not badass. It's like unpleasant and like kind of awkward and scary and realistic. It's like by far the most like realistic and horrible violence in these books, I think, actually. I thought it was a really effective scene.
Yeah, I loved it. The shocking, like, it's funny because it is shocking, but when you look back on it, you realize we've been leading to this moment the entire time, because like there are multiple moments throughout the book where like Sadeas comes up to Adolin to gloat, and he talks about how he's about to lose control, but you don't really like believe him, because like you're just like, oh yeah, you're just like an angry kind of hot-headed kid that's like talking about like, oh, if I could stab him right now, I would do it. And you're like, yeah, I mean, like, I don't know, we all say that sometimes, right? We don't
Right.
we don't actually just grab a guy and stab him to death. It's a really effective moment, and it is a really good near end of book moment that sets up that character, who, I mean, I think this book has a lot more for Adolin to do, and I like him more than I did in the first one, but like he's still definitely on his own journey, and I'm really interested to see where it goes, because obviously like the cool thing about storytelling and narrative is like when someone like this does something like that, you know they're not going to fucking get away with it. Like
Right.
here's a good rule for storytelling. Anytime somebody lies to somebody else, they're going to figure the lie out eventually, because that's what narrative is, or
Yeah.
like, or why lie if not? So like
Right.
this is going to get discovered in some way. I mean, obviously his death is going to get discovered, but Adolin's role in it is going to get discovered and fuck everything up in a lot of ways.
And even if it doesn't, I mean, it probably will, but even if it doesn't, like the thing about Adolin that's like cool is he basically has his head on straight
Mm-hmm.
as a dude.
Yeah.
Except for this one thing, and now he's made this choice, and this lie, like it's almost worse if he manages to keep the lie a secret, because it's just gonna like eat at him, you know. And we've talked plenty this evening about the idea that like um lies and you know, faking it till you make it, and the idea that you know, her father, basically it was a lie that destroyed him. And like I'm worried that he is going to be sort of destroyed by the fact that he has to live with this lie. Like that's just, I'm saying that's another possible way we could go with this.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
kind
no, I think you're right. I mean, to me, that still leads to him confessing, or that leads to someone learning. Like, one way or another, this is going to fuck him up royally. I think you're right, because there's a beautiful moment where Dalinar thinks he's going to die, where he's going to sacrifice himself to distract the assassin long enough for everyone to get away, and he's like, you know, son, you were always better than me. Like, you have a chance of being like, you started off being a better man than I ever could have become. Like, you have a chance to lead our people and like do, and Adolin, like, textually, when he stabs Sadeas, says like, my dad thinks I'm a better man. Well, it's too bad for you, I'm not. and it's just like, well, fuck, that's not good. Because I don't know. I don't. I wonder like how long for this world Dalinar is. Like, I feel like I've been convinced Dalinar is gonna die since like page 1 of this series, and like I'm
Yeah.
kind of still shocked that he's still alive. And of course, next book is, it seems like it's going to be his book. Maybe he won't get out of his book alive. I don't know. It just feels like we're going that way. So for his son to like fall victim to the exact same thing that was haunting Kaladin for his whole book, yeah, it's big deal, big deal.
Yeah. But I mean, basically, I agree that there's probably some sort of love triangle like thing being set up, except I think the fact that Adolin did this terrible thing is going to play into that and, you know, ruin whatever chances he had
Yeah.
as the Shallan interest.
And I don't know about you, but like when Sadius is like gloating about like how he's gonna use this incredibly embarrassing defeat to his advantage, I was just like, you're just kind of bloviating, dude, because your back's against the wall and you don't actually know. Like Adeline like does this because he's like, oh god, he's gonna convince everyone to hate my father and he's gonna succeed, and I have to take him out now. But like this guy seems like he's just filled with bullshit, and he's always gonna come off as the confident, I have everything in hand guy,
Yeah.
when really like he's entirely ineffective this entire book. Like he was very effective and he fucked them over big time in last book, but like the one thing he accomplishes to do is like send an assassin to yank that lever on the bridge, and it doesn't actually kill any of the people they wanted to kill. It's like he sucks. He's like
Right.
he talks a big game, but he sucks.
Yeah, he's increasingly desperate and like deluded. I mean, I think it's actually well, so here's the thing. It's his wife who's the more dangerous one.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really remember how their society works, but like pretty soon after he died, I was like, "Oh no, now his wife's going to fuck him up like really bad because she's the one with all the assassins, right?"
Yeah, yeah. John says Dalinar does have big Eddard energy. Yeah. Yikes. Yikes. That's true. Maybe
That's
that's why I think he's gonna die.
that's it's a subversion, you see, because we're primed to think that the subversion from the other fantasy books is in play, but actually it's a totally different subversion.
We've come full circle. There was a comment from Stythus that I just wanted to read from a while ago. He actually says it's a love square. It's Adolin, Shaolin, Kaladin, and Kaladin's depression, which is really good.
Yeah. All right. Shall we move on to slide this one? Zeth attempts to assassinate Dalinar, but fails thanks to Kaladin, and he does not take it well. "I fought him," Zeth said. "He protected Kholin." "Ah, yes," Taravangian said, thinking furiously. Zeth had been banished from Shinovar, made truthless for something relating to a claim that the Voidbringers had returned. If he discovered that he wasn't wrong about the claim, then what? Him? "You fought a Surgebinder?" Adratagia said, glancing at Taravangian. "Yes," Seth said. "An Alethi man who fed upon Stormlight. He healed a blade-severed arm. He is radiant." That strain in his voice did not sound safe. Taravangian glanced at Seth's hands. They were clenching into fists time and time again, like hearts beating. "No, no," Taravangian said. "I have learned this only recently. Yes, it makes sense now. One of the honor blades has vanished." Zeth blinked, and he focused on Taravangian as if returning from a distant place. "One of the other 7? "Yes," Taravangian said. "I have heard only hints. Your people are secretive, but yes. I see. It is one of the 2 that allow regrowth. Kholin must have it." Zeth swayed back and forth, though he did not seem conscious of the motion. Even now, he moved with a fighter's grace. Storms. "This man I fought," Zeth said. "He summoned no blade." "But he used Stormlight," Taravangian said. "Yes, so he must have an honor blade." It is the only explanation." It. Zeth's voice grew colder. "Yes, the only explanation. I will kill him and retrieve it." "No," Taravangian said firmly. "You are to return to Dalinar Kholin and do the task assigned you. Do not fight this other man. Attack when he is not present." "But have I your oath stone?" Taravangian demanded. Zeth stopped swaying, his gaze locked with Taravangian's. "I am truthless. I do as my master requires. and I do not ask for an explanation.
So it honestly took until this moment for me to finally care about Seth as a character. And I don't remember, and maybe I'm just totally wrong on this, but I don't remember in the first book that we learn why he's been dubbed Truthless, right? From making a claim that is true.
Right.
Like, speaking of truth and lies that surround this book, he was dubbed Truthless for saying that Surge Binding was coming back, that the Voidbringers were returning, that everything was coming again, and he was called a liar and dubbed Truthless, and he was 100% right about all of this. And getting to see his reaction to that, right? Getting to see him deal with this branding that was put on him, and the reason why he became this assassin who was forced to do all these terrible, terrible things. No, he was right the whole time. I think that's such a great choice, and it finally won me over to this character, and I'm into him now.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a great reveal, sort of along the same lines that, like, all of the reveals just turn out to be satisfying in that particular way, where you realize that the thing that required an explanation has just the perfect explanation.
Yeah. The perfect explanation narratively, but also thematically, I think, is the big thing for me. It's like the most satisfying narrative explanation is one that ties into the themes of the individual characters, but also the overall book. And that's where I think Sanderson is just really, playing straights here, that, like, it all works. It all ties together. It all adds up to one story, like, in a ways that feel completely satisfying. And it's the last 300 pages or so of this book are just firing on all cylinders.
Yeah. So Zeth has an honor blade, right? He's not actually a Surge Binder.
He did have an honor blade. Kaladin takes it back by the end.
Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
So that's how he was able to do the lashings, and that's how, like, why he was sucking Stormblood or Stormlight so quickly, because apparently honor blade usage is way less efficient than Spren based Surge Binding.
Gotcha.
Let's talk about Teravangian while we're on this, because this is really the only slide where we talk about this guy.
Sure.
Really fascinating character. I'm not sure I understand exactly what's going on with him. This intelligence, this daily intelligence change thing is really interesting.
Yeah, he got this power from some being, I guess. And like, kind of obviously to us that he's being manipulated into doing evil stuff.
Yeah, because, like, his one genius day is when he made, what are they called? I forget the
plan. Whatever it was.
It's a thing. Someone in chat will say it. But like, they're basing all of their actions and moves off of this prophecy in the one day of his genius. So Bishop's saying the same being who took Dalinar's memories. I think it does say that. The diagram. Thank you. It's really interesting. I don't know what to make of it yet. Here's something I'll say. I do not like Sanderson's putting little passages at the beginning of chapters that all tie together. I have never liked it in any of his books. I love this book, and I don't even like it here, because there's too much time between each of the little things for you to actually, like, coherently read the thing that's being shown to you. And it's like, I think it's okay because it doesn't matter, but maybe it does matter broadly, but it doesn't matter for the individual characters.
Well, in the audiobook experience, what it does effectively is make sure that I'm not paying attention to the first couple of sentences of the actual chapter, because I'm like, wait, okay, so that so what he said before was this, and so this is continuing, and oh wait, we're already into the next chapter, and I wasn't paying attention because I was thinking about the fucking preface line, whatever you call it.
Look, and there is obviously, and I bet most of the fans of the story like grab a version of those things that are all cut together, like the letter to Wit, that is in the last like, I bet if you cut that together and read it, it becomes really interesting. But, like, I don't think you should have to do that, and I just don't find them effective. I think they're mostly just fun extra things, I hope, because I don't garner any information from them at all.
I think the only one that I think really worked for me was one of the ones in the Mistborn series where it was like the you thought you were reading one thing, and then by the end of it, due to the progression through the story, you realize you were reading something else entirely, and
Sure,
it
sure.
changed, and you were like, oh, what? But I don't think that's what happens in any of these. So,
Yeah.
I mean, a little like to a lesser degree, maybe. Yeah, I don't remember my mind getting blown by any of the epigraphs in this book. Thank you, Science Space.
Yeah, yeah. I like. I think they're, in my mind, they work best as fun bonus content for people that like want to collate them together or just search on the internet for where that's already been done. But I haven't done that, and I don't really have an interest in doing that. Yeah, I think Sam says I usually just ignore them because anything plot relevant is explained well enough once you need to know. Yeah, very true. But I just feel like they're there to give you little hints and bits, and I'm just like, it's not working. It's not working, Brandon. If you're expecting me to gain information from these things, it's not working.
Right.
Okay, let's move on. This is the moment, Matt. This is Kaladin's moment where he turns on his awesome and fucking finally figures out what to do. We end this. Kill the king with a shard blade. It will still look like the assassin, hopefully. Those blood trails are frustrating. They might make people ask questions. Here, let me cut these boards so it looks like he came in through the wall, like last time. Cold air. Rain. Yelling? Very distant. He knew that voice. Syl? Kaladin whispered, blood on his lips. Syl? Nothing. I ran until I couldn't any longer, Kaladin whispered. End of the race. Life before death. I will do it, Graves said. I will bear this burden. It is my right, Moshe said. He blinked, eyes resting on the king's unconscious body just beside him, still breathing. I will protect those who cannot protect themselves. It made sense now, why he had to make this choice. Kaladin rolled to his knees. Graves and Moshe were arguing. I have to protect him, Kaladin whispered. Why? If I protect, he coughed, if I protect only people I like, it means that I don't care about doing what is right. If he did that, he only cared about what was convenient for himself. That wasn't protecting. That was selfishness. Straining, agonized, Kaladin raised one foot, the good foot. Coughing blood, he shoved himself upward and stumbled to his feet between Elokar and the assassins. Fingers trembling, he felt at his belt, and after 2 tries got his side knife out. He squeezed out tears of pain, and through blurry vision saw the 2 shard bearers looking at him. Moshe slowly raised his faceplate, revealing a stunned expression. Stormfather. Cal, how are you standing? It made sense now. That was why he'd come back. It was about Tien. It was about Dalinar. And it was about what was right. But most of all, it was about protecting people. This was the man he wanted to be. And then he goes Super Saiyan and like battles the guy in the sky.
His hair turns blonde.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's pretty awesome. It's a pretty awesome battle, actually. It's not overly complicated. I think this is something I realized while thinking about Sanderson in general. Is I realized, Mistborn was an earlier book. The Mistborn magic system is so incredibly complicated. I would say overcomplicated. This is like just kind of the right amount of feeling like epic and powerful, and it's not like it's not complicated, but it at least there's only so many things that Kaladin can do. And
yeah, I don't need hard magic systems in my fiction. I know a lot of people like them, and a lot of people like Sanderson's magic systems, and I don't think the Mistborn one bothered me quite as much as you, but I like that we don't understand a lot about exactly how all this works. Like it's just, and it's kind of, we're learning more as we go, but I like that it's just kind of vague. Like these are the things I can do. I like it a lot. And yeah, I think that fight's really fun. I mean, it's epic and giant, but also very simple and fun. I love Syl's ability. Like I love the wrinkle of the shard blade, that it's actually like shard whatever you want it to be. That's very fun.
Yeah, that was
shard
very cool.
Shield, shard
she turns
axe.
into a spear.
Yeah. It's like this is what you said at the very beginning, and I think this is what we really want to harp on here. Like the reason the reason I love this book is because I think Sanderson is doing character stuff at a better level than he has ever done before. But like, inarguably, the one thing that Sanderson has always been incredible at is moments, is really wonderful epic moments. Every single one of these books I read, whether I liked them or not, or loved them or just thought they were okay, has had moments that are just like, fuck, that's great. And this book has a bunch of them. At this moment right here on the page is another one. That moment where Syl goes, "Oh, I forgot you might want a spear," and then just turns into a spear, and you're just like, "Oh fuck." He's just really good at building to these really satisfying oh shit moments that always pay off in a really great way. Like, he's I'm gonna say this for you, but he's the Zack Snyder of book writing, and I'm saying this for you. But he does. I think he's actually a better writer than Zack Snyder.
I appreciate how hard that was for you.
But all I mean by that is I think one of the things that Zack Snyder is very good at in his movies, which I don't like particularly very much, is he can build to a really epic, wonderful moment. I think Sanderson is better than Snyder in my opinion in just about every way. But I think it is like that is a fair enough comparison, I think, on that one characteristic.
I get what you mean. I get what you mean for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I neither of us liked Warbreaker very much, but even that one had a moment, a few great moments in it actually. Like setting everything else aside.
And I mean, I think building to those moments and having those moments pay off is, I think, more challenging than you would think it is. Just to make them satisfying in the perfect kind of way. And I think Sanderson writes that really well. There's a lot of action in this book too. I mean, we didn't pull any slides for it because I'm just not too interested in talking about action sequences on book club, but I think he writes action fairly well. I think the big climactic fight is very fun. I love how it's broken up, and we kind of are cutting back and forth between what Dalinar is doing and what Adolin is doing and what Shaolin is doing in the middle of this thing, and then cut back to Kaladin, who's frustrated at the fact that he's back home, unable to help. We stage the battle in really interesting ways, so it doesn't lose all meaning, because we kind of zoom in on important beats and moments and then zoom out to see large movements. I don't know. It's really effective to me, I think.
Yeah, me too. All right, shall we move on to
the second to last slide of the evening?
Dalinar demands the Stormfather grant him his powers. Dalinar looked at the sky again. I have been commanded to refound the Knights Radiant. I will need to join their number if I am to lead them. Distant thunder rumbled in the sky, though there were no clouds. Life before death, Dalinar shouted. Strength before weakness. Journey before destination. I am the sliver of the Almighty himself, the voice said, sounding angry. I am the Stormfather. I will not let myself be bound in such a way as to kill me. I need you, Dalinar said. Despite what you did, the bridgeman spoke of oaths given, and for each order of knights being different. The first ideal is the same. After that, each order is unique, requiring different words. The thunder rumbled. It sounded like a challenge. Could Dalinar interpret thunder now? This was a dangerous gambit. He confronted something primal, something unknowable, something that had actively tried to murder him and his entire army. Fortunately, Dalinar said, I know the second oath I am to make. I don't need to be told it. I will unite instead of divide, Stormfather. I will bring men together. The thunder silenced. Dalinar stood alone, staring at the sky, waiting. Very well, the Stormfather finally said. These words are accepted. Dalinar smiled. I will not be a simple sword to you, the Stormfather warned. I will not come as you call, and you will have to divest yourself of that monstrosity that you carry. You will be a radiant with no shards. I will do what I must, Dalinar said, summoning his shard blade. As soon as it appeared, screams sounded in his head. He dropped the weapon as if it were an eel that had snapped at him. The screams vanished immediately. The blade clanged to the ground. Unbonding a shard blade was supposed to be a difficult process, requiring concentration and touching its stone. Yet this one was severed from him in an instant. He could feel it.
So I love this. I love that the Stormfather's like, no fucking way, I'm not doing that. And then he says the right oath, and he's like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
Oh, like, you can imagine him up in, like, Sprenworld or whatever being like, oh, shit, he said it. He said it. I gotta
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to learn more about the Spren through the Stormfather Spren god creature.
Yeah.
And, like, you got to wonder what powers this is going to give Dalinar. It's a fun thing to, it's a fun hook for the next book, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Especially like we don't know a lot about him, but we know like he was responsible for summoning the High Storm. He's like, oh shit, fuck all these people. I'm bringing the storm to kill them all. And then so when the two storms hit, like, I don't know. It's really interesting. He doesn't seem like a great dude. So how will his partnership with Dalinar work here? I don't know. I'm really into it.
We'll have to learn from each other.
Mm-hmm.
Just for some reason, the mention of eels here just reminded me of how much I appreciate the fun background element of just like the bizarre ecology of this planet.
Yeah.
Where it's like everything is like crustaceans and like plants that suck back into holes when the storms come.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know. I really think it's cool.
I mean, I think one of the things you said last time around was it just doesn't feel like these people, these humans, are from here. It's just like it's so alien and different to them. Like, it just doesn't seem like they should be living on this place because they don't match up with anything else that's here.
They don't match up. The horses are obviously not supposed to be here. There's chickens. Shaolin finds a parrot, which is being also called a chicken, even though it's obviously a parrot.
Well, and as Miss Evil Doom just said, one of the things that Wit points out, who is obviously not from this world, is you call it an axe hound. You know what an axe is. What is a hound? And they don't know. Like, it's just it's a lot of fun stuff sprinkled in there.
Yeah, I mean, I did think it was funny when Wit is like he's like pretending to, I don't remember what it is exactly, but he just like casually refers to like disgusting slimy creatures that live here, and and it's really obvious that he's not from here and he's not used to it.
Yeah. Speaking of Wit, let's move into our last slide of the evening. Here's our end of the book, where we learn Yasna Kholin is, of course, not dead. You'll likely be better off on the other side, Yasna Kholin. The desolation has come, and with it, the end of this land. He looked at her. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry, she said, until we see how much I can salvage. The storm has come already. The Parshmen have transformed. Yes and no, Wit said. The storm should hit Shinovar tonight, then work its way across the land. I believe that the storm will bring the transformation. Yasna stopped in place. That's not how it happened in the past. I have learned things on the other side. You are correct. It is different this time. She licked her lips, but otherwise did a good job containing her anxiety. If it's not happening as it did before, then everything I know could be false. The words of the High Spren could be inaccurate. The records I seek could be meaningless. He nodded. We can't depend on the ancient writings, she said, and the supposed god of men is a fabrication, so we can't look to the heavens for salvation. But apparently we can't look toward the past either. So where can we look? You're so convinced that there is no God. The Almighty is... Oh, Wit said, I don't mean the Almighty. Tanavast was a fine enough fellow, bought me drinks once, but he was not God. I'll admit, Yasna, that I empathize with your skepticism, but I don't agree with it. I just think you've been looking for God in the wrong places. I suppose that you're going to tell me where you think I should look. You'll find God in the same places you're going to find salvation from this mess, Wit said, inside the hearts of men. Curiously, Yasna said, I believe I can actually agree with that, though I suspect for different reasons than you imply. Perhaps this walk won't be as bad as I had feared. Perhaps, he said, looking up towards the stars. Whatever else might be said, at least the world chose a nice night upon which to end. And there's the end of Book 2 of the Stormlight Archive, right there.
Yep.
I guess I wanted to talk about Sanderson and religion again, because it's obviously such a huge part of everything that he writes. And I find this really fascinating because obviously Sanderson is a religious person, but he writes a lot about the gods that people worship not actually being gods.
Yeah. right? In I think in all the books we've read of his, actually, there have been in fact, yes, explicitly men who were called gods because they were powerful,
Mm-hmm.
but they were indeed just men who had power
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was obviously magic, and but not really what we mean when we say God. Like there's then eventually in certain of them, I'm trying not to spoil like Mistborn and stuff, but like I think there's this idea in the Cosmere that there is like an ultimate force of creation and goodness and an ultimate force of destruction and evil, and they like ramify through all of these different worlds somehow. We don't really know how, or at least you and I
Mm-hmm.
don't yet. And all of the things that we see in all of these different worlds are manifestations of the struggle between the two of them. And that's the God. But like those forces are so like abstract relative to like the day-to-day existence on Rashar or whatever. um yeah, anyway,
Is
that's
it Rashar or is it Roshar?
um Rashar, I think, is how Roshar.
I don't.
It's just a
I'm just asking. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
it's funny. By the way, it's also Moash, not Mosh. So like pretty much every word in this book is just pronounced ridiculously. I'm sorry.
Cuthbert.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. I think this is really great, and I think it is. It strikes me as obviously like there are lots of people that write about religion and God and people of all different faiths and belief levels, and I think plenty of atheists have written about religion and gods. Plenty of religious people. I I find this really fascinating because I think sometimes to me the faithful write the most interesting things about the lack of deities, because like they are the ones that are almost actively engaging with those thoughts
Yeah.
constantly. Like, I mean, Martin Scorsese's Silence is one of the best movies of the last 10 years, and no one saw it. It's a wonderful movie about a Catholic priest that goes to Japan to try to convert people and like has his faith challenged, and like it's beautiful and wonderful. And I think that story and that movie could only come from a person of faith who is constantly doubting and questioning and wondering about their beliefs. And I think, I think it's overly simplistic to just say Sanderson is writing about gods that aren't really gods because he's questioning and doubting his faith. But I think like anyone that believes in any kind of god has those thoughts constantly. Like they
Yeah.
have like worries and thoughts like, is this real? Am I buying into this? Have I been tricked into believing something? Everyone that believes something has those thoughts. And so I really love looking at Sanderson kind of going through and trying to understand and quantify and qualify what God is and what his faith is through these made up worlds with these made up gods.
Absolutely. I mean, we just talked about Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe the other day. We talk about Tolkien all the time. These are two other fantasy authors who clearly just their lifelong, meditating on religious topics influences the way they see the metaphysics of
Yeah,
their
yeah.
worlds, and in lots of little ways, lots of little, it that's not like why they sat down to write those books, obviously, but as they're thinking about like, well, why does my world exist? What
Yeah.
what are the sorts of things that are like, what am I trying to say? Like the religion, the beliefs, the faith always comes in there.
Yeah, and I mean, I do think it says something about Sanderson that this has been a consistency in every single Sanderson book I've read, that there are holy texts or things that are taught and passed down through the generations about deities and powers that people read and digest that end up being bullshit. Like they end up being not true, or just mistaken, like either manipulated into lies or just being a misunderstanding or a misclassification. That is interesting. That is
Yeah.
really interesting because we have these same texts in our world, and there are many people that wholeheartedly believe in them, and there are many people that don't, and there are thousands of different variations in between those two. And so the fact that he's constantly dealing with that idea, I think, is really interesting to me.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think that, yeah, Shallan and Kaladin are not religious people. I mean, it's not like they're atheists necessarily. They just don't really think about it very much.
Mm-hmm.
What they are, though, is they're people who are struggling with the difficulty of trying to like be good people in two different ways because they're two very different people. And I think this is also a thing that, you know, if you can't trust the religious texts, then how are you supposed to find guidance in the world? Like, how are you supposed to find true north? And Kaladin struggles with this a lot in this book, where,
Mm-hmm.
you know, he's like, okay, yeah, I'm going to protect everyone by killing the king, and it's like this makes sense in like a rational kind of calculating way,
Yeah.
but it's not true to him, and that's, you know, it's not easy, right? It's not easy to
Yeah.
find your way if if you don't have some kind of external source of your morals.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder, because the thing I'm thinking about is, you know, you said Shaolin and Kaladin are not very religious, and I think that's true. I mean, I think this is a society that is like kind of much more religious than ours, right? Like the Vorin society has kind of dictated a lot of just general behavior, whether or not you are actively worshiping the Almighty or not, right? I think Yasna in this is really the only like outspoken atheist in that she like audibly says, like, I don't think Kaladin ever says, I don't think the Almighty exists. Kaladin just never prays to him except for various moments throughout this book where he even comments on like, wow, how long has it been since I prayed to the Almighty? Yasna is really the only one that's just like, this thing's all bullshit, and it's gotten her in trouble with the church for being so outspoken about that.
Right. I mean, it's always fun in fantasy novels where it's like the nature of a church is going to be a very different thing when you have like magic.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you're just like, it's the magic's right here. Like yeah, it's I think they have fun with it. I think it's a good
Yeah.
it's fun.
Yeah. I mean, I think like as people are kind of talking about in chat, I love this idea that Wit says at the end thing, like, if you want to see God, you know, look in the hearts of men, which, you know, I think to Yasna means there is no God, like, but there is like power within us, and if we want to turn for help and guidance and hope for the future, we have to turn to ourselves because nobody else is going to help us. I think to Wit and to Sanderson, what that means is, you know, we kind of want to personify and you know, humanize God in a lot of ways. Like, we think of it as this literal being that is literally like sitting on a cloud watching over us. And I think like it's more to Sanderson, it is this more abstract thing. It is this just general force of goodness that created the universe and is instilling us with all the power and love that we need to make it through what is, you know, for many people an incredibly difficult and rough existence.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think literally what you said. I think in Sanderson's conception, God is goodness,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, the devil or ruin or odium or whatever is destruction and
Yeah.
and evil.
Hey,
and
I have a question
yeah.
for the Sanderson geniuses in our audience right now, because they use the word odium at the very end of this book. That was in Mistborn, right? That name, because I've seen it somewhere else and I couldn't remember where. They mention odium in Mistborn, right? I'm not going crazy, because like I can't with all this stuff, I can't Google it because I know I'm gonna get like huge spoilers.
Yeah, right. Pan Cosmere spoilers.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Miss Evil Doom is saying yes.
Yeah, that's what we thought. We just weren't sure.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
So I got a connection. I got one. I didn't miss that one.
You got one. Good job.
I did it. Any other questions or things that you guys think we did not talk about that we should have? Yeah. I remember Odium being different from Ruin. I remember Ruin. Ruin combines with the other one to make harmony at the end of Mistborn, right?
I don't know, man.
Thank you, Kyrgyzstan. Appreciate that. All right. Well, a good discussion, I think, Matt. That was fun. I was a little worried about this. It was a very big book. It was difficult to pull slides. But as I think Miss Evil Doom was noting, the book is kind of divided into 3 separate books. And if you just kind of narrow your lane down. But I think you were talking about this. I don't remember. I talked to you too much, and I don't remember if it's on the podcast or not. You were talking about the sprawling nature of the book, right? And how
Yeah.
this actually enhances your enjoyment of it.
Well, what I was saying is that I was thinking a lot about the Wheel of Time this week because the Wheel of Time TV show trailer just dropped, and I realized like I was like so obsessed with Wheel of Time when I was a teenager, like super super ridiculously obsessed, and I realized that the reason I was so obsessed is because it's like 10,000 pages of sprawling like world and just detail, and you just like soak in it, and like the thing that allows you to become so deeply absorbed into it and obsessed with it is because it's not a tightly written propulsive narrative. Like, so it's just a funny realization, I guess, that a tightly written propulsive narrative is a fantastic thing, obviously, but that's almost, you can't get as absorbed in a tight short novel as you can in a long sprawling novel like this one.
Yeah.
So
I
that
mean,
was just, yeah.
I compared, Worm and Ward to television shows, and I think these books are closer to that as well. That it's like it's meant to kind of sprawl and meander in some places, to kind of just allow you to really dive in to the deep end of the world.
John asks, "What do you think of Elhokar as a character?"
I feel bad for him. I think he's just a dude that's in and over his head. Like the problems with monarchies is, like, if the king's like smart and talented, it can be a great form of government where you can get shit done and the people will flourish. But when you get people that just aren't very good at it, you're just kind of fucked. And he's just not very good at it.
Yeah, he's not a good fit, and you kind of appreciate like, oh, I think he also is probably a surge binder, by the way.
Interesting.
Because he's always seeing shadows and stuff.
I thought that's just, see, the problem, like, is he just paranoid or does he have superpowers? Like
Well, that's the thing. I thought that there was a specific moment in this book where it was like, I always see things when I look in mirrors. It was something with mirrors, I thought, or maybe it was literally shadows. And I was like, oh, this really kind of reminds me of like what happened to Shallan before she kind of first went into Shadesmar. I don't know. I could be wrong. He could just be paranoid, but
I think that'd be fun. I mean, I feel like we're just gonna get a lot of surge binders. Like we got 4 that we know about at the end of this, and as well as, I guess, Lift, who I think they're gonna be everywhere.
yeah, I mean the book says there's just like a ton of different surge binder like classes. So we're gonna be in like a parahuman situation. We're gonna have like 80 people who have just like a huge variety of powers all bouncing off of each other.
Mike asks, I'm curious why you chose to do The Way of Kings in 2 parts and Words of Radiance in 1. Honestly, just experimentation. We thought it was a long book and it would be too much to talk about in 1 episode, so we tried it as 2, and we kind of figured out that doesn't really work, especially because, like, the first half of Sanderson books, in my opinion, are usually the weakest, and so we just had 1 episode where Matt and I were like, man, this book really sucked, and then another episode where we were like, no, it's better. It's better than that. It just didn't work. So
the first episode being like, yeah, I really didn't enjoy this, but I'm fully confident that he'll pull it out in the second half. I'm just annoyed right now. And then being correct because he did pull it out in the second half. So.
Yeah. And this was really just an experiment in, can we cover a book this big in 1 episode that feels like we satisfyingly talked about the book? And I mean, in my opinion, yes. I don't know if not all books are created equal, and I think Sanderson in particular like allows us to cover 1,000 pages in 1 episode in a way that maybe some other authors wouldn't, which is nothing against him or his stories. It's just different.
Yeah. Yep.
That's because Shaolin was the worst in episode 1 of Way of Kings. She was the worst.
I think he kind of intentionally made her the worst, actually. So it's not like we're wrong.
John asks, what big twist do you... Oh, wait, no, I missed Miss Evil Dooms. What character do you most want to get a viewpoint book from? Well, we know... Like, I'm 90% sure Dalinar is the next one. I'm, like, 60% sure... what's her name? The Parshendi chick is the 4th one. So I guess I feel like they're all going to be surge binders in some way. So um,
Yeah, I don't know.
I forgot the prince's
That
name again. The
that
what's his
I
name?
never know. I never know how to answer these questions because, like, part of what I love about intriguing side characters is that we don't know that much about what's going on with them. And then if you got a whole book from their head, I think that would like it's like they wouldn't necessarily bear up under that level of
Mm-hmm.
intensity, unless, of course, the writer would have to think of a whole arc for them, right? Um,
Yeah,
so,
yeah. I don't know.
um,
The way I understand it is this is a 10-book series, but the first 5 are about these characters, and then the next 5 will have a big time jump, and then will be different characters. That's my understanding of how this whole thing's going to shake
okay.
out.
Well,
So we really only have 3 more books with these folks. So
okay.
there's really only one more book that we have a possibility of having a point of view character.
Riker's Beard says, should I start reading Stormlight Archive or Wheel of Time?
Ooh.
The answer is, of course, yes. I mean, no, I don't. See, the thing about me is like my relationship with Wheel of Time is like too complicated to give an answer. I mean, I'm enjoying Stormlight so far. Wheel of Time has a problem, which is that the latter half of it goes off the rails, and then the author passes away, and it gets finished by Brandon Sanderson, who, in my opinion, doesn't do. It's just a different author. Every time I talk about this, I sound like I'm like bashing Sanderson's ability to write it. It's like, no, it's not his series. He can't do it right. Like, nobody can finish another person's series right.
Yeah.
You know, and
This
it's
is-
just it wasn't satisfying to me. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I have never read Wheel of Time, so I can't answer. I mean, so read Stormlight Archive. It is kind of exciting knowing that he's going to actually finish these books because, like, if you can say one thing about Sanderson as a fantasy author, he actually finishes things, unlike the other authors who will remain nameless.
That's right.
John
All
says,
of the other ones.
"What big twist do you think will happen in the next book?" Ooh, what big twist is going to happen, Matt?
It'll turn out that the Surge Binders are actually the Voidbringers.
Oh, I like it. I don't know. I think that's going to be that answer counts for both of us.
Yeah, there you go.
Catnap says, "Did you cover everything you wanted to?" I mean, I think so. I'm sure there's little bits and pieces that I wish we had spent some more time on. I think I kind of focused our slides on Shaolin because I thought it was her book, so I didn't pull much of the early Kaladin stuff. I just don't know how much there is to talk about there because I think we really captured it in the decisive moments of his arc. That pulling the setup not as necessary.
Yeah, I think we focused on the key stuff that's going on. I mean, they're incredibly long books, and there were a lot of great moments, but often, you feel like you want to talk about a moment, and all you really wanted to do was like read it out and be like, "Wasn't that awesome?"
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to pull these slides.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
All right, I think that's all the questions. Stythus says one thing that's cool about Sanderson in these long series is the characters don't really arc out too much because people in real life don't arc out. Well, yeah, that's because people in real life don't usually have arcs.
Yeah.
But that, I mean, we'll see. I'm really interested to see how he handles Kaladin in this next book.
Me too.
If the next book is a Dalinar by your book's prediction, what angles would you like to see it take for him? Well, this is really interesting because the book is titled Oathbringer, right? Which we know is the name of Dalinar's sword that was in the hands of Sadeas that Andalin chucks out of a window at the end of the book. But we know, like, he's not going to wield that sword, right? Because that's a dead spren and he's not allowed to.
Yeah. So it's
like,
sort of.
So, like, the term Oathbringer becomes more thematically meaningful than it does literally, like, this is about the man's sword. So I really think it's going to be Dalinar's struggle to unite. Like, he's promised to unite the people. He's made an oath to unite the people, and it's going to be about his struggle to do that. And I think we're going to deal with his past around his wife's death and what's going on there. And I would like to see the struggle to bring people together around his wife and his past link up with his struggle in present time to do just as much.
Yeah, there's all kinds of fun ways that could go. Like, how do you unite people who don't want to be united? There's the fact that we have been setting up for the last two books, Taravangian doing all this stuff to undermine the world in the background, and that's kind of been off to the side because we spent all this time on the Shattered Plains. But now I think we're probably going to leave the Shattered Plains, and so there's going to be some more or less direct conflict between what Taravangian's trying to do and what Dalinar's trying to do. Yeah, that'd be my prediction.
Yeah. People are pointing out that in both the previous two books, it's a book that takes place in the world. So both The Way of Kings was a book in universe, and Words of Radiance was a book in universe.
Right.
I don't know if there's anything book-wise in around Oathbringer. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, maybe it was named after a book.
Yeah, could be. Okay, James, I think this is going to have to be the last question.
Okay.
James asks, Stormlight Archive deals with trauma in a similar way to Ward as a major theme and point of character growth, but there's a big tonal difference. Does the way Sanderson lightens the tone make his approach more effective? I don't know about more effective. It's certainly different, right? I mean, I think, and I don't want to talk too much about Ward here because I don't know how many people in the chat have read it, but Wildbow's goal with that novel was to really dive down deep into the moment-to-moment, day-to-day work that goes through recovering from trauma, to the point where it's like by design depressing and unbearable a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of his characters are not even recovering from trauma; they're living with trauma. Whereas I think Sanderson is following a sort of more mainstream writing school where he's going for the catharsis. Yeah. He's going for the cool moment where the character rises up above their sad backstory and just becomes a badass, and then they're just like better, which is like how every book is written and is not really the way people are, right? So like no. I'm sort of criticizing Sanderson here, but that's sort of like the way we write books.
Yeah, but I think that's just because that's storytelling. Like that's what we want out of our stories.
That is what we want out of our stories. But I mean, I think that's the unique thing about Wildbow is he very rarely does that sort of thing. He almost never gives you a clean catharsis because the point is more like, no, you don't just have a moment where you're like, I shake off my fact that this horrible thing happened to me and. And no, it stays with you. It lurks. It's always there in your mind.
Yeah. John does point out that just like the powers in the Parahumans universe are tied to trauma, the powers here do seem tied to trauma as well. In textually, in that the Radiants were all broken people, but also like we've had two Radiants in two books, and they've both had a very traumatic backstory. I suspect this will continue.
Yeah, that makes sense. I agree.
All right. I think that's going to do it for us for this month. Next month, are you ready, Matt? Are you ready for the reveal?
I am ready.
Next month, we are going to be reading and talking about Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir.
Muir, like Muir Woods?
Yeah, sure. So this is going to be our book for next month. I had never heard of this book before it was nominated, but in my musings around it on the internet, it seems like it's a very, very positively, like the response to this is very positive. So I'm really looking forward to getting into this.
Yeah, it's funny. I hadn't heard of it either, but I think the summary sounds fun. I kind of intentionally didn't find out anything else about it, so yeah, looking forward to starting this one.
I mean, look at this cover quote right here: "Lesbian necromancers explore a haunted Gothic palace in space." That's got everything.
Is this a Warhammer 40K novel?
So we're going to be meeting on Friday, October 1st to discuss this book because it's only 3 weeks to the last Friday in September. By October, we will be back on our last Friday schedule. It's just everything got a little pushed. But October 1st at 9:30 p.m. Central Time. So same time, same place, different book. So I think we're all excited about reading this, and hopefully if you have never read this book before, you will give it a try and come join us to chat about it. But that's going to do it. And so that's it. Thank you, everyone. God, this was such a great conversation. I love when there's a lot of people here and everyone's talking. This is, I think, why we keep going back to Sanderson as much as, Matt and I have had difficulty with his books in the past. Is he's a very popular author. There's always a lot of people that show up, and it's always fun to chat with y'all. So thank you all for being here live. If you are listening to this audio after the fact on our podcast feed, hopefully you'll read Gideon the Ninth and show up live with us next month and chat with us, because it is a lot of fun.
Yeah, and if you like what we do here at Doof Media and you want to see more of it, then please head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and consider donating to support our organization. At any available level, you'll gain access to vote for the books we talk about each month, as well as a bunch of other exclusive features. So go check it out.
That is right. If you have any questions or comments or just want to reach out to us, you can always find us on Twitter at DoofMedia. You can reach out to us via email, doofmedia@gmail.com. You can find us on our subreddit, that's r/DoofMedia, or you can hang out on our Instagram, which is being run by my wife, who's doing some fun stories stuff over on Instagram. That's at Doof Media on Instagram as well. That's going to do it for us this month, and we'll see you all next month. Well, it's October, and we got some necromancers, so that works. That works.
Perfect. Yep.
Whew, that was a long one, Matt.
Is that a record?
I think have we ever gotten? My thing says 240, but I think the total thing is probably going to be more like 235. That's pretty long. I don't know if we've ever gotten to 3 hours. All right, guys. Sometimes we hang around after the show, but because that was so long and it's past midnight here, we're just going to sign off for the night. So thank you, everyone, for showing up. I really meant it. I was not just saying it for the show. It was a lot of fun. We appreciate y'all being here. And hopefully we'll see you around next month for the next book. We'll see you around.
Bye, everybody.
My throat.